Okay, it's 10 o'clock and I think we reached a pause in people joining. So I think we will start at this point. Welcome to you all to this meeting. We will take, first of all, apologies, but we have not had any apologies intimated from board members. So we are all present today, I hope. So thank you for attending. Item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Can I have any declarations of interest from board members, please? I see none indicated, so thank you very much for that. Moving on then to item 3. I will now welcome you all to this meeting this morning. Thank you for everyone who's joined us. Thank you for those listening to us and joining online from the staff groups and others as well. Thank you very much for your interest in our meeting. This is our 5th public meeting of NHS Grampian Board in 2024. Whilst it has only been a very few short weeks since our last meeting, we have a number of important agenda items to consider today. But before we move on to the substantive agenda items, I'd first like to draw your attention to some recent and upcoming items that I believe you will find of interest. First of all, the annual review. As you'll be aware, if you follow NHS Grampian on social media or have seen one of our posters, our annual review takes place on Monday, the 21st of October. This year, we are holding the event in person at the Alexander Graham Bell Centre in Elgin, and it is being attended by the Minister for Social Care, Mental Wellbeing and Sport, Mary Todd, MSP. It is hugely important that the population we serve are supported to participate and contribute to this event. So I would like to invite anyone who is interested in finding out more about NHS Grampian to register to attend, either in person or online, and importantly to submit questions, which is, I think this is the last day in which you can do that. This can be done by emailing gram.involve@nhs.scot. Last month, I spoke about NHS Grampian's participation in Speak Up Week at the end of September. Through a range of activities ranging from unconscious bias and active bystander workshops to pledges from our executive team and awareness raising of our Speak Up ambassadors, I'm pleased that NHS Grampian clearly demonstrated its intent to be an inclusive organisation with an open and trusting culture. With positive representation in mind, throughout the month of October, NHS Grampian will also be marking Black History Month and bringing to life in numerous ways for all of our colleagues. I, along with Chief Executive Adam Caldwells, particularly welcomed being able to enjoy some Nigerian food in the canteen at ARI, which not only brought staff together and celebrated the contribution that diversity brings to our organisation, but showed just how tasty exploring another culture can be. I was also delighted to attend the Durga Puja Festival in Aberdeen yesterday for a second year, along with members of the Staff Equalities team. Just as people from different faiths are welcome to participate in this festival as part of a multicultural celebration, at NHS Grampian we too value the richness that diversity brings to our workforce and society more broadly. It remains incumbent upon us all to reflect upon what we can do to ensure our organisation is a place where people feel able to make their best contribution and speak up when things don't feel right. Now, turning our attention to today's agenda, I would like to highlight the Director of Public Health's report and the NHS Grampian's Climate Emergency and Sustainability report. In receiving the Director of Public Health's annual report, we're reminded that the health of the population in Grampian, as with elsewhere in Scotland and wider in the UK, is worsening. This week is Challenge Poverty Week, and as the report describes, people who live in our most deprived areas are spending a much greater proportion of their life in poor health. As a board and as an organisation, we are mindful of our role in considering how our decisions and our work as an anchor organisation can inform and influence in order to make a meaningful difference to those in society who are most vulnerable. Today is also World Mental Health Day, and since poverty can lead to poorer mental health, well-being and physical health, whilst there is still a great deal of work to celebrate, the fact that 1 in 5 children in Grampian are living in poverty is a stark reminder that we still have much to do. As identified in the Director of Public Health's annual report, climate change is also one of the wider determinants of population health. And it's therefore highly appropriate that the board are also receiving NHS Grampian's Climate Emergency and Sustainability Report today. Here too are some fantastic examples of initiatives to reduce our environmental impact, as well as foster an environmental stewardship approach, not as an add-on, but through incorporating good practice into how our organisation functions. Finally, I would like to mention one brief formal item. Following the recent resignation of one of our non-executive board members, it should be recorded that we are currently awaiting a nomination for their replacement and will share more details on this process and their successor in due course. And now I think we can move on to the rest of the agenda today. Item 4 on the agenda, we have the minutes of the meeting on 12th September 24 for approval or any amendments. Can we approve those minutes, please? Thank you. Those minutes are approved. Thank you. We also have matters arising from that, and I'd like to draw your attention in the matters arising to the action log that came with the board papers to board members here. We decided at last discussion of the committee chairs actually to have an action log at these board meetings of items that were agreed as actions but not included in the formal recommendations. So we're really trialling today how that worked. At the last board member meeting, there were 2 items picked out for actions. One related to item 7 from September's report about the financial position and the value and sustainability programme, and it was agreed that the board would receive a route map on the transformation on the path. The board would receive a report on the route map to transformation. There will be an item on the board seminar on the 14th of November on this, and it will come to the board meeting itself on the 12th of December. And the other item in the action log was the IJP's report, and we discussed how the IJP report on the board meetings could be updated to have themes common to all 3 IJBs and to highlight collaborative work on them. And the chief officers have today produced and will be presenting their report in this new format today from this board meeting and hopefully going forward as well. So just draw your attention to those 2 items from the actions and that they are both being followed up. And I think we'll carry on with that process in this board meeting and in future as well. Any other matters arising from that? No, I can see nothing indicated. Thank you. So we'll move on then to item 5, the Chief Executive's report, and I'll hand over to Adam Caldwell, please. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So as Alison said in her introductory remarks, with so few or it seems very recently that we last met as a board formally. I've just got one issue I wanted to make the board aware of in public, and that relates to ambulance queuing. So again, we're all very familiar with the ambulance queuing, and again how that's absolutely not what we want. We want to be able to get people into the hospital as quickly as we can in a timely manner. We've done, as you know, and we've reported a number of absolutely positive changes already, but none of them have had the scale of impact that we'd hoped or anticipated. And so we are, in the spirit of trying to move forward, trying the next thing alongside clearly working with Scottish Ambulance Service. The work is still, it's a very, very dynamic position. The work is still in the planning. Geraldine and her team, and with support from June, Nick and Paul and many others around this table, continue to work away to finesse exactly how the system will work. But ostensibly, people will come into EMEA or a space associated with EMEA and their care, and then be picked up by our team. This again just is trying to reduce that queue of people actually waiting in ambulances, again, which, as I've said, is absolutely not what anyone wants at all. I was just going to mention that today, just so that people are aware that we continue to work really hard to try and make ambulance queuing a thing that we don't face at all. So this is the next iteration of trying to improve that position for patients that come to hospital, to the EMEA part of the hospital via ambulance. I'm very happy to take any questions, Alison, but that was hopefully just a sense of giving a sense of what we're trying to do at the moment.
Thank you very much, Adam, for that. Stephen and Dennis, please. Stephen first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Adam, for your report. I guess, in my role as employee director, I'm obviously very well aware of the, extensive work that was done at the latter end of last year in introducing the Safe Transfer of Patients project, and that took a significant amount of work that was done in partnership, in with engagement with lots of staff and their accredited representatives. It would be fair to say that given the indications of this test of change, the levels of concern that were expressed approximately this time last year, or slightly less than a year ago, around the safe transfer of patients are being expressed again, and certainly as recently as earlier this morning, I've had formal notification from one of the recognised trade unions, professional organisations, of their significant concern over what is being proposed and how that's being engaged. So while it's unusual for me to make such statements in a public board meeting, I felt it important to do so, and I look forward to us seeking to understand and seeking to mitigate the concerns of staff, as we did last year with with the previous round of work.
Thank you, Adam. Come turn to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alison. Stephen, thanks very much. So, as you know, but this is for the rest of the board, all of the planning for this has taken place in partnership, and we're very grateful to Jamie Donaldson, who's been the partnership rep, working with Geraldine and the team in particular in EMEA. So we've got partnership around it. I think the concerns expressed, let's find out exactly what those are, and continue to work together, continue to work in partnership to see what they are. And I know for our safe transfer of patients, June and members of her team did lots of work with the trade unions to make sure everyone was actually understanding what the proposals were and what they weren't. So I'm sure between the team from Geraldine and professionally from June's team, I'm sure we can continue to do work with everyone involved as we go forward.
Thank you. Okay, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you very much. Dennis, please.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose two things really. The first one is we're using an abbreviation to explain the front door in terms of the transfer of patients into the unit, and I'm just wondering if we need to explain that in terms of being a public meeting, in terms of EMEA. And the second one is, I suppose, again, it's a very complex system, otherwise it would have been fixed by now. And I wonder if it's just worth actually putting on record. One of the complexities is we looked at other modelling at other boards, from other boards, and why some of them don't have the same degree of ambulance stacking as we do. And I wonder if it's worth explaining maybe part of the reason why that is. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Very useful points. Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. So EMEA, and apologies for using the abbreviation, is the Acute Medical Initial Assessment. So there's a group of physicians, and obviously supported with all of the nursing, AHP and other teams around the ward, who work predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly with general practice. So most of the people that come through EMEA are referrals from general practice into the hospital. So that's hopefully just a helpful bit of tee up for, and apologies, I should have said that at the start. The second bit, I think, Dennis, it's a really key point. So I'm doing, with lots of support from lots of people, a ton of work really around the capacity that we have in the hospital, around the bed base. We're doing lots of work with government to try and see if there's a way for us to change our bed base. We've done lots of work on comparative systems, and unequivocally we have an extremely low bed base, which is definitely part of the contribution to the flow of people through the hospital, and that absolutely relates to the queuing ambulances outside. So they're related. I think one of the key messages to take out of that was in your question, Dennis, is it is a highly complex system, and it's exactly what we've experienced with some of the changes we've shared with you before and are in the briefing, that you can change one bit and it doesn't just have a linear effect through a system, because lots of things happen at lots and lots of stages of a process, which is a patient traveling through a system at obviously different rates with different needs and all those things. So it is highly complex with huge amounts of human behavior in that. So lots of small variables that can have an impact and accumulate in a big system. Clearly a very complex system. And I don't just mean the hospital bit, I also mean then how we pass over to Pam, Fiona and Judith in Aberdeenshire City and Murray respectively as well. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Adam. That's a very useful explanation of everything. Thank you. Mark, please.
Thanks so much, Chair. And I suppose, Adam, it would be no surprise that this was raised at the Area Clinical Forum through our GP subcommittee, and I think they had some concerns about the impacts that the stacking of ambulances is having. So I think that we welcome this test of change in obviously taking Stephen's points on board about how that is going to be implemented. But I think working with our GP subcommittee, I think you had already acknowledged that at the last Area Clinical Forum meeting that you wanted to meet or at least work with them in partnership to see how this goes forward. So obviously there were some concerns raised about patients sitting in the community from a primary care point of view, and I think there are ways around that. So I think we welcome that from the Area Clinical Forum point of view, and I suppose we'll happy to work in partnership and advisory as we need to. So thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Do you want to comment, Adam?
If you didn't mind, Alison, just one comment. So absolutely, completely, Mark, and probably just if I can add a couple of sentences for the wider group's understanding. So one of the challenges that we see in the acute medical initial assessment, the EMEA bit, is that, and I'm generalising, but you'll understand what I mean. Most of the referrals from general practice come in a particular window, so they tend to come after lunchtime. I think often, and again I'm simplifying, but often when home visits are done, and therefore the arrival at the hospital bit comes in quite a bulge. So again, the offer from the GP sub, which is extremely helpful, is to work with Geraldine and her team and it's a big if there are things that general practice could model differently to support that flow of people into the hospital in a slightly different timeline. So not that it's a different group of people, but can we manage that timeline slightly differently on a collective basis? And we'll see how that unfolds. Again, highly complex because their whole system's set up in a particular way. But again, it was a great offer from the GP sub to work with us to think about if they're working differently could help contribute to a positive outcome for patients. It's for individual people, isn't it, for patients, and as they need to attend hospital.
Thanks, Adam. It emphasises the importance of partnership and collaboration, doesn't it, to move things forward as we need them to. Mark, are you content? Do you want to come back? Are you content with that?
No, that's exactly what I think we'd agreed at ACF, and just thanks, Adam, for doing that. I think supporting our primary care practitioners is absolutely essential as a part of the delivery of care. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. John, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just two quick questions. Would I be right to assume that these kind of initiatives are being developed not just in Grampian but in other boards, given SAS as a national organisation? And if that's the case, do we have any indications from other work that might have been done on the kind of impact? I know it's a complex system, as you're saying, Adam, but for instance, the proportion of people presenting who might be able to go to AMIO, etc. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Yeah, thanks, John. Really good question, actually. So this particular initiative is we're the first group to try it. So this hasn't been tried elsewhere. So again, we'll be figuring out, and then no doubt they'll work differently with other places. Part of the reason we're starting here is our queuing is definitely at the lower end across the country at different bits. So again, there's an urgency around that really important release of ambulances so they can attend other people in the community. So we're at the start of that. I think the other bit to do is the systems that the ambulance operate with us, again, are slightly, sorry, really, I started that poorly. One of the things we've got is an EMEA, so we've got 2 entry points to the hospital through ED and EMEA. That's not the case in all hospitals. So again, one of the things we continue to look at is whether a single entry point, i.e. a single front door, it is beneficial or not. And I think, like all these things, there's not a right or wrong answer. So again, the team continue to look at whether that would have a different impact on how people flow into the hospital or not. But that's sort of ongoing thinking and work about fundamental redesign of how we're organised and whether we believe that would have a different impact at the end.
Thanks, Adam. John, are you happy, or do you want to come back?
Yeah, no, welcome. And obviously we'll see the detail in due course, but that's really welcome to see the initiatives. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that just emphasise again the importance of collaboration and partnership working on this particular issue, as well as lots of others as well. We're asked to note this paper, Chief Executive Report. Can we note it, please? Thank you very much. Okay, now moving on then to item 6, the finance report. I'll turn to Alex Stephen for this, please. Alex.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're now well aware of the challenging financial position that NHS Grampian finds itself in. So I'm not planning to go through this report in any great level of detail. To the end of August, we have been able to reduce the forecast overspend from the £82.5 million reported to the last board to £77.9 million. This reduction being possible due to some of the decisions made at the last board and efforts from the Chief Executive team to reduce the level of overspend, together with some additional funding from the Scottish Government to meet costs we were already incurring. The operational position continues to remain stable, and I was informed last week that plans are now in place to transfer the last few locums onto direct engagement, which provides us with a VAT saving in relation to those costs. This means that all locums will be commissioned on direct engagement within NHS Grampian, except for those used in a mental health setting. The financial risks remain largely the same in relation to winter and the agenda for change non-pay reform. However, as highlighted in the report, it's likely we will need to increase our provision for the IGB's overspends, and there's some conversation we'll have on that in the next item. And we also have the additional cost of the test of change that which was just described by the Chief Executive, and the service model which is currently being developed, and the cost of that model is not currently factored into our forecast. We continue as a Chief Executive team to look for savings and have taken the decision to slow down, cancel or defer some of our non-legally committed planned investments to support the financial position. We've also provided the Scottish Government with some options for non-legally committed spend, which could be cancelled but would have an impact predominantly on waiting times. Last week, we were advised we should continue to invest in some of the planned care spend, which was being funded by additional Scottish Government funding. We are still waiting for the position on some of the other categories of spend. In relation to the external diagnostic review, the 3 areas were identified in phase 1 where opportunities may exist to reduce our costs. The detail of those opportunities is not fully known at this stage, and will become more apparent during the next stage of work. We'll continue to use the find and balance mantra when considering whether to implement the detailed savings identified through this review. Finally, looking forward to 2025-26 and predict an equally challenging position, the Scottish Government position remains that we need to reduce our deficit below the £59 million submitted at the start of this financial year. We won't find out the level of funding for next financial year until the 4th of December. However, given NHS Grampian's financial position, significant savings will be required next year to meet this target. Work has already commenced identifying these savings, and as you can see within the report, a high-level timetable is contained. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you very much, Alex. And can I thank your team and all staff across the organisation as well for the work being done on finding savings and also implementing the savings as well. It's really important that everybody's involved in this and working together with the targeted approach to savings. So thank you very much to everyone involved in that. Thank you. Hussein, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, colleagues. I've got two questions and a technical question as well, please. First question mentions in the reports that 5 of our fellow health boards in Scotland are currently at level 3. That's, by my maths, that's almost half of the territorial boards, half of the boards in Scotland, 5 out of 14. We're at level 2 in the report. So I guess my initial general question is, other than the support currently being offered by the Scottish Government in terms of the kind of person-to-person support, if you like, what other conversations are taking place with the Scottish Government at a national level to see what more we can do? Because there's only so far you can go at an individual level to get to where we want to go, as shown by the excellent work that you and your team have done so far. What else are the Scottish Government saying, particularly just given your last comment there, that we're likely to be in an even tougher position in the years to come?
Thank you, Hussein. Alex, please.
Yeah, so the national position, a couple of things that's been happening nationally. The first thing, and is referred to in the report, there is an escalation framework. We've self-assessed ourselves in relation to that escalation framework. So we're doing the vast majority of the things that would be required if we did move into level 3 or level 4. So we've gone through that escalation framework and a kind of pre-thinking about, okay, well, what does that mean? Is there any benefit that we could get from that? So we've got that information prepared, and that's going to come back to the Audit and Risk Committee next cycle. This financial year, the government did a lot of work around about the 15-box grid, and that was some of the work that was being looked at in relation to areas that could potentially generate savings within the current financial year. And you know, we reported that to the board last cycle, and we'll continue to update that, which is some of the things that are getting moved forward on a more national footing in that regard. And I suspect, and you know, is that, and through some of the conversations, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another 15-box grid coming out in 25-26 with some more of the national savings that can come out as a result of that. There's also further work being done, and you know, maybe some of my colleagues have a better understanding of some of the other national work that's being done in terms of, you know, reform and redesign. But certainly, I suspect there will be another round of conversations around about how things can be done nationally to try and reduce costs wherever we possibly can.
Thank you. Hussein, you can tell me the answer?
Yep, I've got another question and a
Okay.
slight technical question if there's time, Chair. Thank you very much for the timeline that you've given about the key milestones. I'm just wondering where public engagement sits in terms of that timeline, given the importance of trying to get buy-in as widely as possible into what we're doing, and also generate that public awareness that's important to try and help us on this journey.
Alex, thank you.
Yeah, the public engagement side of things is something we're pretty well aware of as an executive team. So when we did discuss, we've been discussing the transformation plan last week in depth, and you know, some of the ideas that come from there, but also some of the ideas that might come via that, the service redesign and so on framework. So certainly it's an area that we're looking at. We haven't got an exact timetable on that just now, but we will be having a look at the options that come forward to determine whether it's major service redesign or how we engage and get some viewpoints back on that. So certainly it's well within our sight, and we'll pick that up during the process.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think it would be helpful for colleagues to have sight of that update and the timeline for those intentions, if only so that where that public engagement would be helpful, we can try and use our networks to stimulate that. My very technical question was just a curiosity. At the start of your report there, Alex, you mentioned that mental health practitioners would not be subject to direct engagement. I hope I heard that right. Could you just explain why that is? Is that a legal thing that stops that, or is there a financial reason for that?
No, I mean, ideally, we would like to get the mental health consultants on to locum consultants onto direct engagement as well. But it's taken us a little bit longer to work through that process with that group. There's a significant number of locums within the mental health setting. And I think other boards are having that challenge as well in terms of trying to move some of those onto the direct engagement as well. So we're working with the clinical director on that, and the conversations are taking place. And if we do manage, if we could manage to get those local consultants on there, that will also benefit the IGBs as well as NHS Grampian.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Hussein. Thank you, Alex. I think you raised an important point about public engagement as well, that as a board we should be picking up later on as well. So thank you for raising that as well. Joyce, please.
Thank you. One question, one observation. My question to Alex is around collaborative budgeting with the IGBs, because we're trying to work as a whole system. Is it not time to be doing much more collaborative budgeting so that we are aware of what the implications of any decisions are either in the health social care partnerships or in the NHS, and indeed in the council potentially, if we're looking at the wider system? So should we not be doing that for next year in a more open and broad way? And my observation is that whilst we need to do engagement and get people's views, I think that's really important. I think at the moment we also need to be telling people the truth about this situation and alerting them to the fact that the world is very different, and the treatments and what they're going to expect in the next couple of years, if we don't get more funding, will not be anything like what they've had in the last 10 years. And I think it's wrong that we don't tell them that as early as possible. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. That's second point relates to the engagement and with communities as well, like Hussein was hinting at as well. So thank you for that. Alex, collaborative budgeting.
Yeah, so a lot of the conversations are happening, certainly at an officer level in relation to where the budgets are going. So and we've got some of the information coming from the IGBs in the next slide deck. So we'll get some of that information as well. The 3 chief officers have been involved in our conversations about the transformation plan, and the IGBs play a critical role in that. So we are there. We have put some time in for a little bit, but we're trying to get together to around about February time to have a conversation in a more formal setting. We're still kind of scope what that looks like, who comes along, and how we do that. But I do agree with the approach, and what Joyce is saying is that given the scale of financial challenges within the IGBs, some of those decisions will impact on the operational performance of NHS Grampian. We need to be mindful of that, and it's certainly something that's not something that's that we're mindful of, and working to try and mitigate those implications as much as we possibly can.
Thank you, Alex. Joyce, do you want to come back?
Thanks. I'm delighted about that, Alex, because my main concern is that the man or woman in the street doesn't care that we're 2 different organisations. They see us as one, and their health and care as one thing, so don't like the split necessarily. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. It's maybe something we can pick up more in the next report as well, about how we're doing that, because it's certainly an important aspect of work going forward, and makes sense in terms of the public purse in Grampian as well, to work collaboratively on things, especially at this time. Thank you. Mark, please.
Thanks very much. I suppose, Alex, coming back to one of Hussein's points with regards to direct engagement, and where we welcome that, knowing that the locum pool is countrywide, do we think that any direct engagement has any negative impact on recruitment here in NHS Grampian, that then may then have an ongoing impact onto the clinical teams that would be supported by the locums? Have that been impacted that we've seen yet? Thanks.
Alex, any impact?
Possibly one for one of my medical colleagues. I see Paul's got his hand up in relation to that, so let Paul come in.
Yeah, thank you, Alex and Mark. I think the the groundwork that has been done and the understanding with our clinical communities of the financial implications, not only the clinicians, but the medical management, the operational management, and our advisory boards, I think really has been very helpful. And at present, we've not been affected, certainly in the non-mental health services, of recruitment. And in fact, not only have we not had a negative impact from direct engagement, I think some of the early feedback is that the process implemented by the teams in ARI have allowed payments to be much quicker and probably a little bit more effective than what they used to. So that's a very positive impact. And in fact, some of the secondary sort of work being done to reduce costs post midnight have produced no challenges from those in locum posts. Now that is a very significant impact. So I think presently we're in a good place to further push the cost effectiveness agenda. And I think the work to be done is the investment in the locums as a source of potential recruitment for the future in a new workforce model that doesn't rely on the consultant grade. So I think, in fact, there's a lot of positives, although it's still very vulnerable, of course. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Mark, do you want to come back?
No, that's really very, very reassuring. I think that it almost sounds like a win-win, Paul, in that one. So I think that's great, and I think we should commend your team for putting that together and bringing that forward, and we've got our support behind that. So thank you very much.
Indeed, thank you very much, Paul, and those working with you as well. Appreciate that. Thank you. Richie, please.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. Just again, firstly, to acknowledge the work being done across the whole system to help address the financial challenge, albeit massively challenging still. Some of the interventions are showing some progress, which is great. The question was around the unfilled vacancies. I totally accept that's an important tool in terms of managing spend and reducing spend. But I guess it'd be wrong not maybe just to check in that itself is not creating an undue risk in terms of some of that capacity issues and that non-filling of vacancies. So accepting it's a necessary control measure at this point, just looking for some extra assurance, I feel like that in itself isn't providing a different kind of risk that's unreasonable, if you like. So any comment on that would be helpful. Thanks.
Hi, thank you. Alex, I'll turn to you first.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of work on the vacancies. We've got Stephen Lindsay is a member of the panel as well, who keeps us in check in relation to that sort of process. Certainly within my own directorate, we are monitoring the impact of the vacancies and thinking about the best way to deal with that. So we are aware of that. We're also aware of there's almost a bit where you're holding so many vacancies that it becomes a risk. And there's something that as a chief executive team that we're thinking about in relation to how to address that going forward, is that if for instance you had so many maternity leaves within the one section, that obviously escalates that risk a little bit. So we are aware of that, and there's a lot of careful conversations that happen in relation to those vacancies before we hold those back. So there's a lot of, we've done a lot of good work actually over the last couple of months in relation to really firming up on that vacancy control process. Some of the decisions that have been made by Chief Executive, some of the decisions that have been made by Chief Executive team are really starting to deliver some of those savings, which is positive to see. But we can't lose sight of the impact that that's got on people, and we need to manage that impact as carefully as we can.
Thank you, Richie. Content?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, brilliant. Thanks for the answer as well, Alex. John, please.
Yeah, can I just build a wee bit on what Hussein and Joyce have said? First of all, in terms of the cross-system approach, we've got a recommendation to note the key dates for 25-26, and they're listed page 20-21. But I do think there's something here about, and I know Adam and others have talked about how do we get early into that cross-system work. Just a suggestion, it would be helpful, I think, to see the timetable with what the officers and executives are doing, but also the touch points for the different boards. And I think that just would raise, in terms of certainly for Aberdeenshire IJB, where I also have a role, being integrated into the decision making. So it is, people have usefully started to talk about moving from broad cooperation to a deeper collaboration. I think we need to do steps like that to see something different, because the IJB needs to start seeing this. I think across the piece, and the way Alex has presented the position to us, but looking across the whole system, we've virtually exhausted a lot of the efficiencies, and we're now into deeper implications and consequences, and we really need to be seeing those early on, you know, of what we're doing in one part of the system and how it impacts on another. So my plea would be that, picking up on Joyce's point, that we do reflect on that and come back with that step change, if you like. And I know the answer, what I propose, is just one small kind of suggestion, but I'm sure that people will be able to come up with something more. I think on the communication side as well, because we are having to get into more deeper consequences in some of the decisions that are going to have to be taken, our communication with the public is going to be really important. And I know we discussed that at our last IJB that I was in, but I do think it's incumbent on us to look to that, not so much a collaborative view of what we've got to communicate. There are independent bodies, but they need to make sense to the public, because from, like Joyce is saying, from the public's point of view, you know, we're all one system. So I hope I've kind of expressed the points. I think we need that bit of a step change within this, and it'd be good to hear what executives are thinking around that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That's really helpful. And I was picking up an action point from this as well, from what you and what Hussein and Joyce had both said earlier as well, about codifying, if you like, setting out clearly the engagement with public, but also the collaboration points with the IJBs as well, and make something firm to come back to us about what's actually happening with those things. So your comments there are very helpful too. Thank you. And I think we will be noting that as something we need to take forward as an action for next meeting as well. But Alex, do you want to come in, please?
Yeah, there are a couple of things I just kind of say. So we are in the process of setting up some of the engagement with the councils. So we've got some information, we've got some dates in the diary in relation to that already, in terms of some of the conversations that we want to have with the wider system in relation to there. I've got a meeting next week that we've set up with the chief finance officers of the councils and the IJBs, where we'll be looking at the budget timetables just to see where the overlap comes from in relation to that. So we are having a look at that at the moment. I do recognise that there's more work that can be done in that area, and as John's highlighted, we do have a more detailed timetable. I'll be happy to share that, just to provide a little bit more assurance to the board. But you know, we are aware that, you know, that's an area that we need to step into.
Thank you, Alex. Ian, were you coming in on that point?
Thanks, Alex. Yes, I am. It's a transparency statement. Given that Alex has made specific mention of the councils and engaging with them, can I make a transparency statement that I am a member of Aberdeen City Council, and I'm also one of the small group of councillors working on what will be the administration proposal for an Aberdeen City Council budget. So just to put that on record. Thanks, Alison.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you for that. Okay. Thank you. Colette, please.
Yeah, I'll be brief, because John, as is often the case, has much more eloquently put what I was going to put to the board. I welcome what Joyce and John have both said about collaborative budgeting, and also some level of collaboration on the public engagement so that we have consistent messaging right across the whole system that we're talking about. But I think equally important is a collaborative approach to the risk assessment and impact assessment of what these changes are likely to have on service users, so that decisions in one part of the system don't have an unintended consequence in another part of the system. So I just wanted to make that point, that needs to be part of this collaborative approach.
Yeah, thank you. I think experience shows over the recent times how important that is as well. So I'm sure that will be built into what we're doing as well, looking at that wider impact on service users from decisions made across the system. Alex, do you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, we've got our find a balance mantra, and I think we are going to look at how we kind of expand that a little bit and maybe become a little bit more formal in relation to that. So that's obviously underpinned a lot of the decisions that we were making and continue to make during this year. I think it is really helpful to think about what Colette said in relation to that, just to make sure that the implications of all savings are we're fully aware of those. And certainly during the last process, where we did start to have some conversations such as this, it did become clear that, you know, the implications weren't known by the people, or some of the decisions that were being made, and you know that caused problems further down the track. So I think, you know, we've learned from that, and that early engagement is really important in terms of picking up on some of those conversations. Certainly try my hardest to get some sort of coordinated risk and risk approach to that, and completely support what you're saying, Colette. But we need to just kind of work through the process and just see how far we can get in that journey. Thanks,
Alex. Colette, do you want to come back?
Yes, I mean, I should have declared I'm also on the Aberdeenshire IJB, so as you know, just for in terms of transparency. But I do wonder if that a level of balance is being applied right across the piece, across all three IJBs. Is there a common approach to that in terms of finding balance, or is that something we need to look at in more detail?
Alex, do you want to come back on that one?
Yeah, I would say that my view at the moment would be there was no consistent approach, Colette, based on my understanding of the three IJBs. They all will be assessing the implications of the decisions they make, and you know, they'll all have different approaches to their impact assessments, which which are really embedded in the decision making within the IJBs. But I would say that those impact assessments are largely driven by the impact assessments of the local authorities, and those are all slightly different. So there's not a complete consistent approach, and that's certainly something that we can pick up as we go forward.
Yeah, it's also something maybe come out in the next paper as well, in the Chief Officer's report as well. Thank you. Derek, please.
Thanks, Alison. Joyce kicked off a series of points about one system, and I think that's absolutely right. We need to look at it as one system. However, we've got the forthcoming National Care Service, and I think what we need to try to ensure is that the National Care Service doesn't make another barrier. What it does is to help make one system. I'm not sure how that is going to work, but I think we need to be aware that whilst we are trying to create one system here, this is something which needs to be taken into account as we move forward in terms of maintaining that one system that we've got. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Derek, for that. We obviously submitted our submission, our views on the National Care Service in response to the request for the consultation survey that went out from the Scottish Government, and we submitted that 3 or 4 weeks ago now, I think, along with other organisations, other individuals as well. So obviously the Scottish Government will be looking at all the submissions and all the comments made around the National Care Service, and we await outcomes from that work, I think, is where we are on that one. Thank you. Okay, I can't see any other indications there. I feel I should also make a transparency statement like Ian did, that I'm an Aberdeenshire councillor as well. So just say that as we move forward. I have an action point coming out from this already, which we will record as an action point as well about the team sharing the more detailed timetable, about collaboration with partners, and about early engagement as well, and also giving us information about the collaborative approach around risk assessments as well going forward. So that will come to us as an action at a later date as well, either at seminar or at board as appropriate. We have the recommendations on the paper. We're asked to note the revenue overspend and projected revenue overspend. We're asked to note the steps that have been taken to defer non-legally committed expenditure for the remaining of the financial year in line with the Scottish Government's instruction to all boards to review planned expenditure. We're asked to approve the steps being taken by the Director of Finance to agree the scope and fee structure for phase 2 of the external diagnostic review, and note the key dates for developing the revenue budget and financial plan for 25-26. And that's obviously the bit that we've added bits to around that. So can we do those 3 items of noting and approve the steps being taken by the Director of Finance? Can we do all that now? Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Okay, now we've talked a lot about it already, but let's move now to item 7, the integrated joint boards and forum reports. We're starting with a presentation from the chief officers on the integrated joint boards, and thank you for this new approach to this item as well. Before we start, I mean, I'm sure it's going to be very valuable to us as a board as well. I see Pam ready to speak, I think, so I'll turn to Pam to take us forward on this one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So I'll just hopefully be able to share my slides. So hopefully, I don't know if people can see that.
Yeah, thank you. It's not on slideshow itself yet. Yep. It's not on slideshow mode.
Let's slideshow mode.
Yeah, brilliant.
So
thank you.
That's helpful. So thanks very much for the opportunity, and as chief officers we considered what was the thing that we thought would be most helpful to share with you. You clearly have the minutes of our meetings, but we thought that the thing that we probably wanted to focus on was our budgetary position. So one of the things that we thought would also be useful was to set this in the context of our IJBs, but also the wider position for IJBs across Scotland. I just wanted to mention we had the recent publication of the Accounts Commission report on Integration Joint Boards Finance and Performance, and that was published in July of this year. And what it set out was the financial position of IJBs across the country and what they were the challenges around that. And some of the key points that were raised in that report was that IJBs face a really complex landscape of unprecedented pressures and challenges and uncertainties, and they're not easy to resolve and they're worsening. So that's around the complex and unmet need that we're identifying and needing to address, increasing inequality gaps, and also challenges and uncertainties around our operating environments. The report also, The report also stated that we had that there wasn't significant evidence of a shifting of balance of care between hospitals and community that had been really the intention when IJBs were creating. So in effect, IJBs have been working within the resources that they started with, and that increasingly has made that more challenging going on, but also that we're working in a very complex governance system, which means that it makes planning and decision making difficult. And I think we've touched on that a little bit this morning, talk about the relationship with the NHS Board, but also we have those reciprocal relationships with councils. It also mentioned that workforce is under immense pressure, which is really reflecting the wider pressures on health and social care system, and that there's difficulties around recruitment and retaining of skilled workforce. And then also I think has been touched on, there's the uncertainty around the direction and plans around the National Care Service. And there's also been quite significant turnover in the leadership of IJBs. So the chief officer roles, chief finance officer roles, and some of the leadership teams has changed significantly. And then the financial look of IJBs continue to be weakening. So what they've identified right across all IJBs is that they've got significant financial pressures, some which are arising out of elements such as inflation, pay uplifts, but also some of the legacies from COVID in terms of complexity and need, but also with an ageing population. So I think what they identified was it makes it even more important that that the budget processes are clear and there's an open conversation with IJB partners, the workforce and the people and services and stakeholders for health and social care. One of the facts that they also identified was in 2022-23, there was a decrease of 9% in real terms of the IJB's budget, and also that many IJBs, that the reserves for IJBs were at that point of reporting, and now it's more extreme, that almost half of the reserves had been depleted across IJBs. So I know certainly within Moray and within Aberdeenshire, the reserve position is depleted or almost depleted. So that's some of the kind of background context which I thought would be important to identify that we're operating within. So going on to what does that mean within our own IJBs? So what we've set out here is the different positions of the three IJBs. So the Moray position for 24-25, they set the budget a little bit later. It was set in May. And in that, at that point, they identified £80 million worth of pressures against a £200 million budget. The senior management team have put in a project management approach to the savings, and they've had wider leadership sessions looking at a 3-horizon model across services. They're going to be working in relation to the 25-26 budget through regular IJB budget sessions, and they're looking for forecast savings of between 6.7 million to 11.5 million for next year. And what they've identified is a significant challenge around the resources to drive and undertake real transformational change in order to deliver the budget challenges. So in Aberdeen, so when they looked at the 24-25 budget, at that point they had a range of a forecast overspend of £2 million and put in savings against that. So the senior leadership team had sessions to identify savings and are making good progress in that, in the sense of that Q1 they had an overspend of 600k, but what they did identify is that's underlined by risks going forward. And so looking forward to 25-26, they've identified an £11 million gap. The city did have some reserves that they were able to contribute towards the budget this year. In order to take forward planning processes around budget, the IJB is shadowing the Aberdeen City Council processes around public consultation, and as mentioned there, they've talked about their effective use of IIAs, which I'll come back to at the end. So in Aberdeenshire, we had a budget forecast ranging, and this is depending on the achievement of savings, of between an overspend of 14 million to 26 million. Senior management team have budget oversight arrangements in place, as is an overall IJB budget review group. So there's a lot of control in terms of managing the budget. And one of the things that we've been looking at is a peer review process. So bringing in some external expertise from the council and from the NHS to review whether they are things that we have missed, things that we could be pushing on harder in relation to savings. We've also tapping into, where we can, collaborative partnerships around working around digital within the council and lean working. So the IJB has set development session planned ahead to look at both monitoring the budget position for this year, but looking ahead to next financial year. And as part of the review of the IJB strategic plan, we're undertaking a significant consultation engagement with the public and staff at the moment. So we're visiting around Aberdeenshire, and one of the main topics is really about how we use the IJB pounds and where would the public's priorities be around that. So coming together, we had some reflections about what the shared issues and opportunities across the IJBs. So one of the things that we've done together is there's been sharing of information across IJBs about where their saving areas are. So we've had that and we've shared that within the 3 Grampian IJBs to say, are there things that we're missing that other IJBs are looking at, and can we consider other saving areas that we might not have considered. We're looking at the effective use of impact assessment. So that's something I think, as mentioned, is quite embedded within councils. So that's a tool that are being used within the health and social care partnerships when looking at savings. And we've also come together for some collaboration. So, for example, around the prescribing summit, which was around primary care prescribing, which was a significant cost pressure to each of the 3 IJBs. So in terms of looking at the wider system communications and going forward, it's really about considering looking how we can work together. And I think you were touching on earlier about the implications of the different parts of the systems when you're making a change. So as IJBs, we work across 2 systems. We work across both the health system and the council systems, and so changes from any of those parties will have an implication for the services that people achieve. Also, how can we work together to free up some of the capacity so that we are looking at some of the more challenging changes, that we can do that in partnership across the 3 IJBs. And that's particularly when you're working with the public, because as mentioned, people do not see the difference between the different organisational bodies, but also as a population of Grampian, they may not see the demarcations that we see in terms of our organisational boundaries. So what is the general expectation of the public, and how do we work with that? Also about how can we look at we've had to have a real focus around budgets and savings. So that has meant that we've had to divert some of our attention from maybe existing work that might be some expectations around that, for example, around government strategies or ongoing work that the public might be expecting in terms of service delivery. So we've had to really focus in on where we can be our efficiencies and our savings agenda. So there's something around that whole system communication about the sort of work that we cannot do during this time when we're focusing our staff's attention on savings. One of the challenges, which I think people will be aware of working within IJBs, is really the organisational change difference, the organisational differences between the 2 employing organisations. So we have staff who work in the council and staff that work in the NHS. If you consider that about 85% of IJB spending is with staff, so therefore it makes the organisational change arrangements very pertinent to when we are trying to make savings. And then also, if you consider that some of our finances are actually, we don't have much room for manoeuvre within them. So, for example, within Aberdeenshire IJB, about 25% of our spending is in primary care and in prescribing. And that really, the primary care funding is a flow-through funding, national formulary that goes to GP practices. And so actually, if you're looking at where we're making the savings, you're making a savings on actually not the whole budget, but an element of the budget. And then within that, you have to make the staff changes. So the room for manoeuvre and the speed of change of savings can be challenging in that context. Talked already about managing the public's expectations. So really there's a need for realism here, that this will mean service cuts service reductions. I think that's really difficult to communicate to the public. We can transform services and make the best of the resources that we have, but the scale of the savings that we're looking to make will mean that there will be a perceived loss, and that will be on a service basis, but also that will be on individuals. So if we are currently reviewing packages of care that individuals are receiving, that those immediate individuals and their families will notice the differences in the changes that we are making. And then through this, what we've been looking at is how can we keep an eye on a 3-horizon model? So how can we make changes and the savings now, but also have an eye to how we're trying to progress and move forward, and to look at what our model of care will be, in the next 20 years. So what are the aspects that we need to be developing in order to move towards that different way of working and that 3rd horizon model? So certainly we are working closely together in terms of where can we share some of the changes that we're trying to make and the transformations, so that we are pooling expertise, pooling knowledge, but also that will allow for a wider population engagement about some of the changes that we need to make. So that's across the 3 IJBs and the chief officers. We're working very closely on that, but also I think, as articulated earlier, that will be within the NHS around the wider transformation and within the councils as well. Thank you. So I'll just stop sharing.
Thank you very much for Pam. That was really interesting and really important. I think so we can see the benefits of having this kind of report from you as well. And it highlighted to me that the collaboration work and how the 3 IJB chief officers are actually working together on things as well. And I think that's really important in this climate as well. So it was good to hear the collaboration between you and the opportunities maybe to learn from each other as well on what each one's doing separately and bring it all together together as well. So thank you for that. Sandy, please.
Yeah, just building on that, Chair. I mean, Pam, I thought that was really, really helpful. I think you've very clearly set out the position very well, and ensuring that we're fully sighted on what's been attempted to, I suppose, address an extremely challenging position. Dennis, Derek, and I heard the other day from the interim chief officer in Murray of just some of the detailed work that's taking place locally, and there was an excellent workshop apparently with all the budget holders, and rather than staff being defensive, they were fully engaged in discussions around potential solutions to take things forward, but very much aware of the risks to the public and how to manage that carefully. I think, Pam, what I'm hearing is quite a shift from previous years where I think staff are fully engaged in the process at a local level, that the 3 IJBs are working closely together, that they're working together very closely with NHS Grampian and the three councils involved. And I think also that engagement nationally to make sure that ideas and concerns are shared is really, really important. I suppose the only thing I wanted to ask, Pam, I think chief officers do meet with the Scottish Government, and this is an exceptionally difficult time. Are you finding that the Scottish Government are listening, are supportive, are engaging, enabling, or is it very difficult to move things forward? Because you will be, presumably as a group, putting forward suggestions to change, transform, reduce, or whatever services. Do you get a sense that the government has been helpful and supportive? Or is there more that we can be doing to help that process as well?
Thank you. Pam, do you want to respond?
I think potentially, I'm not sure whether there's a realization of the significant level of the challenge. So I think that so we had, for example, as you say rightly, we have chief officers group where we meet across Scotland, and one of the things that we had conversations about was a new planning with people, requirements, and we were saying how that, along with, as I talked about in terms of, you know, the staff changes, that these are some of the things which make it very difficult. And I think it's almost like they hear it, but they don't realise the implications necessarily of it. And it's similarly along some of the, we still have the interactions with the different policy parts of government, where they view their bit of policy direction and requirement as really important, and therefore they can see that we make savings elsewhere, but we need to deliver on that element. So it still feels like we are reporting to different parts of government, all with their own requirements, and they don't see the whole. So I think there's actually maybe not a recognition of the whole, and I'm aware certainly the report that I was referencing in terms of the Accounts Commission was really strong, but there's similar correspondence that's gone in relation to from COSLA, saying some of the challenges and the operating environments. And I think the fact that we're having to say that really loudly and frequently almost reflects the fact that I don't think it's quite been heard yet.
Thank you, Pam. Sandy, you coming back on that?
Yeah, just briefly to say, Pam, I'm not entirely surprised to hear that. And it does concern me. I think my message is that as during these really challenging times, if all our staff and all the different parts of the system are actually joining together to try to transform the system, then the Scottish Government needs to do the same and pull together and more coherently support chief officers in what is a really difficult situation. And I think we'll all have our own parts to play in trying to make that happen. Yeah, time's of the essence, and we must pull together, and the government, I would suggest, needs to do more. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. The encouragement of Scottish Government to work at the whole system, I think, is something that's been made by lots of people in lots of places as well, and will continue to be made, I'm sure. Thank you for that. Colette, please.
Yeah, Sandy, your last point, I totally support what you've just said. My question, Pam, thank you for an excellent presentation, and it is really great to see that we're talking about pan-Grampian transformation and partnership working, so that's fabulous to see. My question relates to public engagement. I've been involved in public engagement in the past, and I'm just wondering how that's going. Who is engaged? Are people turning out? And all of that kind of stuff. Is it going well, or is that something that collectively we could do more to help with?
Thank you, Pam.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, yes, you make a very good point. So as I mentioned, we are out at the moment in Aberdeenshire to public engagement, and I think as was discussed at the IJB, you get a certain level of people who are interested, who will come along and participate. I do think that the challenge is, as always, when you have a specific change, then you engage with the people affected by that, and I think you can then have a really good debate and understanding. I think when things go out more widely, then you get that kind of that wider views in. And so I suppose what I would be suggesting is, I think where the strength will come is if we're all having a consistent message. And I think there is this need to really be honest with the public about, and I think Joyce was mentioning earlier, I think if we can be honest with the public and say, you know, it really is something where it's coming down to choices, that it can't remain the same, and that we are going to have to prioritise. And I think the difficulty is actually communicating that really well and consistently. So it's a bit like we need to repeat it and repeat it, so that there is a wider understanding. And I think then the important thing is the work that you know, Luann and the putting people first agenda is, when you then go into doing the reforming and changing, that you absolutely do it alongside people. So I think that's when we can do that. But I think recognising that things are going to change, I think that's where we probably need to, if we're all consistently singing to the same tune on that, that will be helpful.
Thank you very much, Pam, for that. Thank you. Okay, Colette?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's just one final point, which is, I mean, many years ago, I was the head of rural service delivery in the UK government, And I think we mustn't lose sight of the fact that communities can actually be part of the solution, not just part of the problem. So, you know, we really need to focus on how we can bring communities along with us in this messaging.
It's a really important point to emphasise. Thank you very much for that, Colette. All right, I've got 4 hands up at the moment. Can I ask people make their comments briefly and their points briefly to Pam now at this point, please? Hussein, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And not a question, but just some reflections I thought might be helpful. Thank you very much, Pam, for the presentation. I would completely concur with everything Sandy has said. I think he put it far more eloquently than I could. And there's an emerging theme, I think, for this meeting about Pan-Grampian cooperation. And we've seen that from the North East Partnership Steering Group as well. Compared to where we were, let's say, a year ago, there are a lot more conversations now about how we can share learning. We're moving to a point now where we're talking about how we can share resources in whatever form they may be. As Pam has already said, Aberdeen are looking to shadow the Council's budget consultation. I think my only point of caution, and it was also mentioned by somebody earlier, was not to inadvertently start confusing the public in terms of who delivers what, because very often it is just a very transparent delivery at the point of service. The public often don't mind who delivers the service, it's what they receive as opposed to who delivers it. But I've no doubt that, you know, the learning that comes out of this, because it is something that we're trying for the first time in the city, will be shared across with colleagues. But lastly, I'd also like to say, I think sometimes our staff are also our greatest asset. And I've seen through the city IJB some of the most innovative transformations, particularly around digital and how we can maximize value from every pound we spend, have come from within the partnership themselves. So I'd just like to take a moment to put my thanks to all of them and to our chief officers and their teams for all the work that they've done. Thank you.
Thank you for those, and thank you for your reflections too, Hussein. They're very, very pertinent to this as well. Thank you. Dennis, please.
Thank you, Chair. One element that we have little control over is the cost of our prescriptions, and that's both in NHS and in terms of primary care. There's some work being done in terms of trying to engage with our communities on social prescribing. And I'm just wondering, are we taking a pan-Grampian approach to that engagement in terms of the social prescribing, which could have a positive impact on our prescribing for the future? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn back to Pam for that one, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So it's been Susan might want to come in, but I think we're working with the support of public health in relation to that. So some really important work, and maybe Susan will come in around social prescribing and where to target it. So that shared learning is taking place through the Population Health Committee and the Portfolio Board to make sure that we are picking up the expertise and knowledge, both the academic base, and then how we apply that locally. So yeah, would want to confirm that that absolutely is being joined up across Grampian.
Thank you, Pam. Susan, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, thanks very much. And we've touched on it a little within the DP report, but we have a network of actors together, but importantly, is some of the things that might get in the way. So issues such as information governance and sharing information has hindered being able to monitor the impact of some of the activities, but that's part of what we're trying to do through the Portfolio Board, is address some of those challenges. We've also highlighted link workers, which are absolutely key based on our communities. And again, nationally, there is a review of community link workers, and one of the consultants in public health in my team is actually chairing that review. So we're keeping really close to the learning nationally as well as locally. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Susan. Thank you for that. Joyce, please.
Thanks. I'd like to thank Pam for a really clear presentation. That was very, very useful, and I agree with what Sandy said with regards to how we should be working in future. I am also in the Aberdeenshire IJB, and whilst I've been concerned over the last couple of years about the pressure on the workforce and the workforce at the sharp end, given our difficulty in getting people to be care workers and such like, because you can work in Aldi's for more money than you can work as a care worker. I'm also now concerned, both in the NHS and in the Health and Social Care Partnership, about the senior teams who are being pressurised more and more and more with regards to things that are virtually impossible to do now with the money that we have. People can only do so much. These people have worked very hard. They've been accustomed to working in an environment where there has been sufficient money to get by. And it's very different when suddenly there is no money. There is no willingness to be helped on how to change. There are huge restrictions on how you can change because we work in a very unionised environment, which is wonderful for the staff in many ways, but it also restricts change in some ways because it takes a bit longer. But the government also restricts change because of the ways that we're not allowed to do things. So I see it very, very complicated environment for senior team, and I worry that we will start to lose people in the next few months because of the pressures that are on both operational and senior team members. And I want to raise that concern specifically because I come from the staff governance point of view. Thanks.
Thank you very much for raising that, Joyce. And obviously, it has been discussed at staff governance, and it's an issue that's being raised nationally by the board chairs group as well, by the board chairs of all 22 boards as well collectively, about the impact on our executive and senior management of the environment they're working in particular, and all the pressures on them as a result of that as well. So it's being raised nationally as an issue as well. So yeah, it is something of concern right across Scotland at the moment, and just take this opportunity to thank all our senior managers as well in the work they are doing in these very difficult circumstances. Pam and the other chief officers, but our wider team across NHS Grampian as well, very much appreciate all the work being done in a very challenging situation for all of them as well, and we really do appreciate what they're all doing. But I think I'll leave it at that at the moment, then, and move on to John, please.
Thank you. Just a quick observation and then a short question, which can actually have a yes or no answer. This has, I think, been really important conversation, and thank you to Pam and the other chief officers, but Pam for presenting it today, for that focus on the North East and joined up. And I think we haven't said it explicitly, but I think it's implicit in what we were saying, is we can't resolve the acute issues if we don't address the whole system, and vice versa. We can't resolve the community side, but what we are being driven towards is dealing with the symptoms, and therefore it's going to be very welcome, the November seminar and the December meeting that we have, to develop this conversation with that transformation piece that will come to us, and try to get into the detail of it. My question is just a simple one of, we have our own annual review coming up very soon, and whilst it will focus primarily on NHS Grampian, is it going to have an opportunity to at least air some of these thoughts? Because we're talking about messaging to key stakeholders. It'd be really helpful if some of this can be aired at that meeting. Is that the intention?
Yeah, we obviously have the annual review coming up, and there will be a need there to review all the things to do with NHS Grampian, and that includes some of the issues brought up here as well. There's also sections in it which are led by the ACF and GAPF as well, and they will be bringing forward points within their own sessions as well about the overall work of NHS Grampian. And obviously there's the public session, and maybe take this opportunity as well, to urge the public that there is still an opportunity at this stage to put in questions that they want to have asked and answered at the annual review, and remind people now, I think today is the deadline for that. But if you have a question about anything you've heard today, if you're listening to this now, or please, make sure you put your question in as well. That's a clear aspect of this work. Okay, John, is that fine?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to market that a bit more as well. Thank you. Okay, well, can I just say thank you to Pam again for the report she's done there. We're asked to note the report. I think we've well and truly noted it. So can we agree we've noted it? Thank you. Okay, we have 2 more items under this agenda theme, so we'll turn to those, and then after that point we'll have our comfort break. So I turn first of all to the Area Clinical Forum, to Mark, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be as brief as I can. First of all, an apology for not having a written report. Unfortunately, due to some communication errors, I didn't get that until very late on, and with a heavy clinical work input, sometimes it's difficult to get all reports out in time, so apologies for that. Just to say that I'd like the board to be assured that the ACF is working as its advisory and representative function. Hopefully you'll be assured of that. Some updates. We've got a welcome of a vice chair. So Dr. Robert Lockhart has been appointed as vice chair of Area Clinical Forum. So that will obviously support me in my role. So I appreciate that coming forward. He's chair of Area Medical Committee already. So I think his input will be invaluable. I think from an advisory point of view, I think we're welcome that the Chief Executive team invited myself as chair of ACF and Stephen as chair of or co-chair of Partnership to our critical thinking sessions about transformation. So I think it's a really welcome initiative that we are involved in that. So I thank the Chief Executive team for that. We're also preparing for the annual review. I think I'm first up on that one. So and my first chance at being able to sit down with ministers and with the I think it's the Caroline Lamb to discuss our options at the and what's been going on within Grampian. From our last committee, which was a couple of 3 weeks ago, I think some of the concerns have already been raised about the GP subcommittee raised some concerns about the Scottish Ambulance Service. I think that's already been addressed through Alan's report and are discussed. The other concerns that were coming out of the Area Medical Committee, and it's been no secret, there's been some communication from the senior management and consultant group in Dr. Gray's of some concerns they had about the strategic direction there. I think that's already been addressed by the Chief Executive team, and there will be further discussions at board level about that. So I think that is being taken forward. It's always difficult to separate out the strategic and the operational aspects in Area Clinical Forum because they often overlap. There's some concerns coming on from our consultant subgroup about the infrastructure around CDU and the impact that had, but I think those challenges are now being worked through, so that was raised at the time. I always like to, when our reporting, have some good news in that we have to remember that we still provide a huge amount of healthcare. I think we can often focus on some of the financial difficulties, the negativities that we've got, but day in and day out, our staff are working diligently to provide healthcare for our patients in NHS Grampian. So a couple of good news stories coming out of pharmacy. We've had a gold standard pharmacy approach, and 12 pharmacies have been enrolled and achieved this gold standard. 12 more are signed up, so that's a great initiative. And from an area dental committee report, we noticed that there was increased access to dentistry, 35 NHS dentistry practices taking on patients, which is welcome. Some of those are focused in the city, which is always a little bit more difficult for patients out in the Shire or Murray, but it does come across NHS Grampian as an increased access to dentistry. So just a quick update from ACF about the work that's going on. I think it's important that we strive to have that positive culture about the work that we do actually provide to the population of Grampian. Happy for any questions. Thank you.
No, and thank you very much for highlighting all the good work that goes on. There's an awful lot of patients being treated, an awful lot of good work being done by staff across the organisation, and we do need to acknowledge that and thank everybody for that. So thank you very much for putting that perspective on this meeting as well too, Mark. Thank you. Dennis, please.
It's not really a question, Chair. It's really just to congratulate Mark for bringing up that positivity at the end. It's always very welcomed, and I think it's an acknowledgement that we should all try to endeavour to have as we're looking at some of these very, very trying times that we have. Can also congratulate his Vice Chair. Robert actually is a very important member of the Murray IGB, which I co-chair, and he's made invaluable contributions over his time at Murray. So that's extremely good news as well. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and it was good also to hear from Mark's report that things he brought up as issues are being worked on in partnership and collaboration with others as well. So it's good to hear those issues are being taken forward as well. I can't see any other indications, so can we note Mark's report, please? Thank you, and then we turn to the Grampian Area Partnership Forum. Stephen, please.
Thank you, Chair. So a lot of similarities with the verbal report the Mark's just given. The reason there isn't a written report from Grampian Area Partnership Forum for this board meeting is that in the month of September, Grampian Area Partnership Forum had its annual development day. So on the basis of positivity, that was a very well received event for those who were fortunate enough to be able to attend it. We had an excellent session looking at burnout, psychological safety, and also had an opportunity to ask Adam and other members of the Chief Executive team some questions in a version of Ask Adam Live. So we're still working our way through the feedback, but broadly it was very well received and very well appreciated. So the next step of that will be how to spread the useful outputs from that across the system and share it with other colleagues. And beyond that, GAPF meets as back to normal, conducts normal business from next week. And like the Area Clinical Forum, we are also preparing for our GAPF meeting with the Minister as part of the annual review. I think we are second on the day. In Elgin. So yes, given a lot of the conversations I've had this morning, and accepting and embracing Joyce's comments about trade union activities, as the staff-side organisations within that GAPF session, we will be able to reflect on the circumstances that Grampian as an area finds itself in. And perhaps say some of the things that that are slightly more difficult for others to say. So I shall stop there. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Stephen. Thank you. Have you got any comments or questions for Stephen, please? I very much appreciate you reporting to us verbally, and obviously it was only a month since the last meeting. Good to hear the positive feedback about the development day as well for GAPF, and remind that both the ACF and GAPF are really important parts of our board meeting, and so it's great to hear from you at this point as well. And obviously we've moved it forward in the agenda because of the importance of that as well. Okay, I can't see any other indications for comments for Stephen, so can we note his report as well, please? Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of item 7 on the agenda. So we will now take a 10-minute comfort break. We'll return at 11:42, please, after 10-minute comfort break. Thank you very much. It's 11:42. So I think we'll reconvene the meeting again now. Hope everyone's back. Just checking that cameras are on of board members so I can see that you're back. Okay, David, I don't know if you were at the meeting at the beginning when we had declarations of interest. Do you have any declarations of interest for this meeting, David?
I wasn't there at the beginning. No, I had an overrunning prior meeting. I have no declarations of interest.
Brilliant. That's the important bit. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, with that then, we'll move on to item 8, the Director of Public Health Annual Report, working together to help health happen. Really important to have this, I think, this particular Challenge Poverty Week as well. It's very interesting to have it that week. I will turn to Susan, please, to introduce this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison, and thank you very much for offering us the opportunity to present our DPH annual report. I've got a couple of colleagues with me today, Paul Seisworth, who has led the editorial team, and Shantini as my deputy. Every year we produce a DPH annual report. In the past, we used to pull together quite a wide range of data. It generated a bit of interest and then pretty much sat on a shelf for the rest of the year. So we've shifted how we delivered the DPH annual report, and last year we took a slightly longer lens in terms of the threats to overall population health. The challenge when we presented it to board members was the so what? So what are we doing about it? So this year we've followed up in terms of the 4 threads, trying to highlight some of the great work that is happening across the North East. And I hope a couple of messages come out of the report. One, that change is possible if we work together. There are some fantastic examples outlined in the report, and that we as decision makers have absolutely a key role in creating the conditions for change. So with that, I will hand over to Paul, who will do a brief presentation of the report. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Alison. Yeah, just to say, obviously, looking at your screen at the DPH Annual Report 2023, that's a bit of a bureaucratic idiosyncrasy that we have to produce a report every year, and there wasn't one produced during COVID time, so we're running a year behind. So it's called 2023, but it is the current one. It's really great to hear the kind of key threads coming through in this meeting of collaboration and cross-system working, because that's absolutely at the heart of this year's report. Key messages in terms of the health of the population, unfortunately, are that the health is worsening overall, and that's not unique to Grampian. It's across Scotland, the UK, and a number of other countries. But we've seen this. These graphs show life expectancy, female life expectancy at the top, and male life expectancy at the bottom for our local authority areas and for Scotland. And you can see this really consistent upward trend. This goes back to the 80s, this graph, but you could see this back to the Second World War. It's really consistent upward trend, and then around 2010, 2012, this flattening off, and in some areas actually life expectancy getting worse, and particularly in our more deprived areas, so seeing those inequalities widening. And that's the second big message for our population health. The inequalities are widening. This graph shows healthy life expectancy. That's the amount of years you would expect to spend in good health across your life. And this is Scottish data, but from the most deprived and least deprived areas, for males at the top and females at the bottom. And the main message there is this huge discrepancy between the amount of life lived in good health in poorer areas versus in rich areas. I think what's particularly striking for me in the male category is that men living in richer areas live longer in good health than men living in poor areas live at all. That's the state of that inequality. And just to say, when we talk about life expectancy, we often think about our aging population, people not living as long at the very high ends of age, but actually the healthy life expectancy and the dropping healthy life expectancy we've been seeing is to do with poor health in middle age. It is not just about multimorbidity in older age. So this report really focuses on our framework for population health and what we're doing about it. On the left, you see this figure of health, and you can dispute the kind of individual numbers, but basically the main issue it's showing is that our health services really are a small part of what keeps us healthy. And we really have to be looking across the whole system to be able to have an impact. And we look at this through the 4 pillars of the King's Fund's population health system, which are the wider determinants of health, our health behaviours, the places and communities we live in, and an integrated health and care system as part of that whole. And I'll be going on to those individual aspects. But really, what we want to be doing is identifying where we can tackle multiple of these pillars at the same time, rather than seeing them separately. So coming on to the wider determinants, Alison, you mentioned Poverty Week. The increasing cost of living in recent years can't be over repeated, I think. This is a graph showing food prices in the UK over the last decade or so. You can see there's some fluctuation, which is normal all the time, going up and down. But in the last couple of years, we've seen this absolute shoot up in food prices, to the point where food prices at the beginning of this year are about 40% higher than they were just a few years ago. And research done in 2015-16, so this point of the graph, showed that about a quarter of households in the UK at that point would have to use at least a quarter of their disposable income to meet minimum nutritional standards that we set nationally for how we would like people to be eating healthily. So something to bear in mind as well when we're thinking about health behaviours, etc. But that's obviously just thinking about one aspect of how the wider determinants are really impacting on people's health. So what are we doing about it? One of the projects that's ongoing is a cost of living, cost of smoking project. where NHS Grampian teamed up with the University of Aberdeen and Turning Point Scotland to engage community members that were affected by both smoking and cost of living issues, but engaging them as co-researchers and trying to do some research on what would work for those people. But traditionally, we recruit people as subjects of research, and these were doing participatory action research, whereby they try and make change through the research as co-researchers. And it's worth looking into in detail. There's a link in the report. But some of the key priorities identified are finding healthy alternatives to address the stress-related causes of smoking, inclusive and targeted access to available cessation support, incentivising cessation through locally framed messages, and deliberative dialogue between communities and service providers. So we're really coming into that putting people first approach. We want to move from a more transactional thing where we provide services to a community to much more of a dialogue where we and our communities are working together to provide solutions. On the right is just some of that messaging that came out of this. One of the things that came up was people saying, I don't want to be told if I save this money that I can afford the bare essentials. I don't want to be told it will help me afford my weekly shop or transport. Actually, I want to hear what luxuries I could get if I quit. So it's much more tailored towards, if you quit, you might be able to afford a nice holiday or put it towards a car. Thinking about health behaviours, again, not in isolation, but on the right is a graph showing the ratio of mortality rates between our most deprived areas and our least deprived areas. So how many times more are you likely to die of a particular cause in our most deprived areas than our least deprived? And obviously the one that sticks out like a sore thumb is drug-related deaths. We're massively overrepresented in poorer areas, about 7 times more likely to die of drug-related death in our poorer areas. So one of our key areas for improvement. And one of the things that's been done locally is looking at a charter for rights. There's both national and local work going on this to help people recognise the rights they have and also to help service providers to be able to deliver those rights appropriately. Some of the things that came up were around age-appropriate peer support services, especially for younger people, single points of access to service, no wrong door, services trained in person-centred care, a lot of stuff coming out from people affected by substance use about wanting to be treated more humanely, really struggling with that stigma, and easy access and removing barriers to care so that people can get the services when they need them. Skipping on to infectious disease, one of the threats Susan mentioned from last year's report, the health protection team been doing a power of work in the background. Some of the big issues this year have been there've been large outbreaks in the last year over in England and elsewhere in Europe, and some cases in Scotland, although no outbreaks as yet. And there's an awful lot of preparation work going on to ensure that NHS Grampian is prepared to respond to cases and outbreaks of measles as and when they occur. It's an extremely infectious disease and needs a lot of preparation to be able to handle properly. Also, we've seen an enormous epidemic of whooping cough in Scotland and in the UK in the last year, an order of magnitude above what we've seen in previous years. This says it's the largest in Scotland in at least a decade, but that's just because that's as far back as I could find the data. It's actually much likely to be much more than that. So a huge amount of work going on to identify cases and to provide protective support for people vulnerable to whooping cough, especially infants and people who work with them. Generally, rates of vaccine uptake in Grampian are high. The vaccination is absolutely the best way to protect against both of these diseases and many more. But there's still a lot of work to be done to improve in those areas where it is lower, including in some ethnic groups. And there's vaccine equity work going on to identify the key issues that are affecting uptake in those communities and take action to address those, including looking at kind of community champion models, which we're looking at across public health. So when we think about the health and care system, we often talk about it needs to change, and it's sometimes a struggle to think about what that looks like. And one of the ways we're looking at that is through the community appointment days approach, which we've had one in Elgin around MSK issues, sorry, musculoskeletal issues, with physios and podiatry. And we've got one coming up in Aberdeen City around chronic pain. But what they're trying to do is innovate new models of care through equal partnerships with communities. It's not about lifting a clinical service and just putting it in a community setting, but how can we wrap a whole range of supports around people so we can see them as a whole person? We can take that preventive approach as well as the treatment and make it at the heart of the community. And that's an ongoing process, but we're looking at different models of doing that. Trying to take a strengths-based cross-system and community-powered approach to look at non-medical needs as well as medical needs. And certainly the early feedback from the Elgin CAD is very positive from patients and staff and third sector groups involved. And there's a lot of excitement around the Aberdeen City Community Appointment Day around chronic pain, where we've had a big conversation involving people with lived experience of chronic pain, as well as service providers and third sector bodies as well, coming together to look at how we can provide care differently and see a person as a whole within their community. Thinking about places and communities themselves, one example is a place and wellbeing network that's going on with two key priorities identified in the last year: social prescribing, which has already come up, which absolutely, Dennis, looking at what can be done consistently across the Northeast. There's a bit of a complex ecosystem of social prescribing being provided in different ways across the Northeast at the moment, and trying to bring that together in what can be done consistently, what needs to be allowed to be flexible so that it takes a more of a place-based approach. But there's a lot of work going on around that. And the second priority they've identified is connecting young people with nature. We've got lots of research showing the benefits of connecting with nature for young people, not just during their childhood, but for the rest of their lives. And the evidence shows a big dip in nature connection in teenage years. So there's a question about what can we do to address that, to help young people connect with nature throughout childhood, to have all those benefits throughout into adulthood. But that's just getting started now. And this last slide is showing a big table of work ongoing around the whole system approach to healthy weight. I won't go through it in detail because you've got it in the report, but it's just really to say the whole system approach is thinking about, we don't take these four pillars in isolation, but how do we work across all the pillars at once? And that's what we need to be doing with all our different health issues. And I'll leave it there. The rest of the information is obviously in the report, and happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Paul. That was really comprehensive and really useful on the back of a very useful report as well. So I appreciate that very much. Dennis, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. And thanks, Paul. It's very comprehensive and well put together. It's just on that point of the, I suppose, teenagers, or when we get to teenage periods in our lives, not sort of having that contact with sort of the nature approach. Are we going to be using, and this is probably there, the tools that our younger people do use in terms of social media, in terms of looking at ways of how promoting that? And is it being led by our young people as opposed to being led by people from research or whatever, that this actually initiative to get our young people connected back with nature is being led by our young people? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Teenagers.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Dennis. I think all of our work we recognise needs to get more community-led, and that includes young people as well as everybody else. And if it's any reassurance, I think one of the first pieces of work that we're supporting is the RSPB doing some stuff in Fraserburgh around starting in the schools there and asking young people to go around the community and identify where they can see possibilities for increasing biodiversity. And then that being part of a broader conversation with the broader community, but with the children and young people leading that. It's absolutely the way we want to go with this. We're not sure what opportunities will arise, but I completely agree, to be done properly, it needs to be led by children and young people.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Okay, Dennis. Go on. Derek, please. Derek.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks for the report. A lot of good information in there. I was particularly taken by the pages 59 and 60, which is the increase in life expectancy. And it compares our region to Scotland. And over the piece, for both male and female, up to about 2010, we were mirroring Scotland. We were pretty similar to Scotland. Over the last 10 years, over the last 10 years or so, we've been below Scotland. And I just wondered if that had anything to do with the level of funding that we get is lower than the rest of Scotland. It seems peculiar that we would match them through the 80s and the 90s and be similar to the rest of Scotland. But for the last 10 years, we've been lagging behind. Thanks.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Derek. I don't have a definitive answer for that, but certainly a lot of the evidence that's come out so far does pinpoint policies making cuts over the last decade and a half across many countries in response to the financial crisis of 2008. So if that is impacting more in some areas than others, it's I think quite reasonable to think that might be part of the picture.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Colette, please.
Hi, excellent report. I really enjoyed reading it. I was particularly interested in the point that you made about health services being responsible for about 20% of what shapes our health. So I suppose, how can we tackle the other components, and how important is it that we work with external partners? And in particular, could you give us a little bit more information on what the role of a public health community champion might be, and who are they and where are they?
Thank you very much.
Colette. Easy questions. How do we tackle the other 80%? I guess that's exactly what the 4 pillars is about. It's that there's no one silver bullet. There's no one thing you can do. We need to work across the whole system, look at all the different social determinants of health. Poverty, which Alison's highlighted, is absolutely key in that, especially child poverty, knowing the impact that has across the life course. But it's about providing a range of responses to issues to prevent those issues in the first place, looking at is a community supportive of people's well-being in the first place, so they're less likely to become unwell? Is it supportive of people who are unwell to help them get better? Are people in a position personally to be able to be resilient, both psychologically but also financially, in terms of the resources around them? All these, and I think looking at that last table where you look at the range of different approaches to healthy weight alone, it's that cross-system working. So it's not about identifying one thing, but as also said by Dennis earlier, it needs to be led by the community as well, so that they're on board with it and they take it on.
Thank you. And I've seen Susan indicate as well. I'm sure you want to come in as well.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. And I think just to echo what Paul's saying, in terms of the pillar that's marked integrated health and care, that's about access to quality healthcare. But of course, we have a role in contributing to each of the pillars. So, for example, some of the social determinants of work, the poverty proofing our pathways is a really important contribution that we can make. So all partners have a role to play in every pillar, and I think it's just it's quite easy sometimes to think, oh, that's somebody else's job. It all matters for us working together.
Brilliant. Thank you, Susan. Colette, are you content with the answers?
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Richie, please.
Hi, Paul. Thanks again for the report. Like others have said, I thought it was a really good read. I was really interested in that reflection you had around what motivates people to live healthier lives, and that it might not be about the cost of living, but more about, I guess, getting a good holiday, for example, a treat or something like that. So I guess just tease that out a little bit more if that's possible. And what could we do, I guess, knowing that, then is there any more thought about how we approach that kind of conversation? What that motivation for people to take some, always take some more individual responsibility? And for example, is it about honest, fact-based kind of approach around setting out on average what it costs to treat different types of illnesses, for example, different types of conditions? Just something really, I guess, powerful. Now, how could we, I guess, now that we know that, how can we motivate more people to take decisions that would improve their public health?
Yeah, thanks, Richie. Again, it's not a simple answer, but I guess I would start with, you need to work with those people who are impacted in the first place, and that's where that messaging has come from, is working with the people impacted by that to say, what would you find helpful? What would motivate you? I don't think you can't necessarily look at evidence that's been brought up from elsewhere and assume it'll be the same for local people. And also that empowerment process tends to make people feel that they're more able to do these things. So I think that in terms of that individual aspect, I think that's where I would start with any of this. But also it's very important to look at it. They're not just individuals, they're also part of communities. And there's something about, I think we often frame health as either personal responsibility or health services are there. And there's something about our responsibility to each other too, as in communities. What can we do to support communities to look after each other? What can we do to make communities places where it's easy to make the healthy choices? And some of that will be things like commercial determinants of health. But some of it will be about giving people the space to help their neighbours and friends, giving them the resources to be able to do that so that they can do it rather than try and provide a health service. But you do need to take the individual aspect in with the community and broader aspect as well.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. That's a bit that struck me in the report itself as well, about obviously our need to encourage healthy behaviours, but in doing so to take account of the social and economic backgrounds of people and that voice of lived experience within that as well. I think that came strongly through the report for me as well. You know, it's not a blanket thing. Let's encourage healthy behaviours. We've got to think about how we're doing it and where we're doing it as well. Thank you, Richie. Do you want to make any further comments?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Just very briefly, I guess maybe it's clunkily trying to, I guess, not quite conflate it, but just put it in the context of some of the financial challenges as well. So it's really important that individual empowered approach in terms of what works for that person, that family, that community, but also gets that wider context we're working in where resources are getting tighter, and can we kind of join the dots a little bit more in terms of how that whole system again joins together. So, but no, that's really helpful, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, how we make ourselves more effective as well. Thank you. Paul, are you coming back on that?
Yeah, it's just a couple of things that are relevant, actually. I think a lot of the learning from COVID and why people engage in the vaccine program, for example, was about protecting other people. So there is something definitely there about what impact do things have on the wider system. But I think through all of this, we have to bear in mind, in a lot of these health behaviours, people know they're not healthy and they know it's not good. It's actually really hard to change. And we need to be very careful in what we do as well, and making sure we don't further stigmatise people. That's just the caution I would put on a lot of this. Absolutely, I think it's great to make people aware of the impacts of things on the wider system, but it is really challenging, especially in certain social environments, and we need to bear that in mind and work with people and not put all the responsibility on them without them feeling like they have the resources to respond.
Thank you very much for emphasising that point as well, Paul. Thank you. Anne, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul, for an excellent report. As I said in the chat, it's a very clear report as well. I'm a Fraserburgh councillor, Paul, and your initiative with RSB in Fraserburgh is really good. And my question is to engage more with young people. Are you working with the youth groups, like the BBs and the Scouts and the Girls Brigade and things like that? Because they're the ones maybe who would engage more willingly.
Thank you, Anne. Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Anne. I'm not sure exactly who's involved in that work at the moment, but I know it's certainly open to all groups, and we can reach out to those groups in particular. I'll make sure it's flagged to the people working on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. And finally, Dennis, please.
Thanks, Chair, for allowing me back in. Again, we talk a lot about engagement and that positivity of that empowerment element of engagement. How much work is being done with, say, our supermarkets and the people that actually produce our food goods, etc., to try and ensure that we've got a more health approach to some of those goods and make them more cost effective rather than profit generating in some respects. So it really is sort of turning the tables round a wee bit and asking, can we encourage that sort of better health through our through our supermarkets and how we actually promote healthier eating and foods, but through cost as well, because of obviously that's a huge element of it. That's probably the essence of my question. What more can we do to really encourage that healthier food within our supermarkets as opposed to being profit driven? Thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Dennis, and Susan may want to come in on this, but I know there's work in the department looking at, we talk about commercial determinants of health and how we work with local businesses to help them be as health promoting as possible. Recognizing in some businesses there's a very definite conflict between products that cause harm to health and the profits that provides, but businesses have a role as producers of products or sellers of products, but also as employers and as members of their local communities. And in some areas, you may find an employer which produces products which cause harm is also the biggest employer in the area, so they can have many different impacts on health. And there's certainly a strategy being drawn up, I think, within the department around what our response to commercial determinants of health should be, how we engage with people like the Chambers of Commerce to ensure that we're influencing them to be as healthy as possible. And I think at a national level as well, they're working with supermarkets to try and encourage them to be as health promoting as possible. But like I say, in some cases, that conflict of interest between profit and health is a challenge.
Yeah, thank you. Susan, did you want to come in to add anything?
And I guess just to add to what Paul's saying, I think action is being taken at different levels, and we have set out what we call our consensus statement, setting out everyone's roles in that. I think the other bit just to highlight is there was a Good Food Nation Act passed, which does require ourselves, local authorities, to set out a good food plan, and I think that will contribute to tackling some of the provision areas that we've alluded to within the report.
Thanks very much, Susan. Thank you. And finally, Joyce.
Thanks. I just wondered if we have a specific strategy or action plan towards children vaping, because it seems to be the biggest growing area. We're talking to 16-year-olds recently, nobody didn't vape, it would appear. And that's quite concerning since we don't actually know the long-term impact at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't know who wants to take that one. Susan, Paul?
Well, I'll come on to Susan afterwards, but we have a tobacco strategy. Obviously, Shantini's got a hand up, but absolutely, just to reassure that we recognise it as a key risk, and we do not want children to be hooked on addictive substances at all, and we do not want them to be vaping. It is something we're looking at, but I'll let Shantini come in with the detail.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as Paul says, there is work going under the umbrella of our tobacco strategy, and I think some work with schools in Shire, as well as some research work with University of Aberdeen, looking at so it's going back to that, how we understand how to get the right messages out, and working with younger children really. And actually, I don't know if Gillian's here, but she's working or leading on that project with a partner in University of Aberdeen.
Brilliant. It's good to hear the project's happening, and maybe we can have updates on that at a later date as well. So thank you for that. Okay, thank you very much. I think we've all found this a really interesting, important report. So thank you very much for presenting it, Paul, Susan and Shantini as well, and anyone else involved in it. We're asked to endorse the paper. Can we endorse it, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. And we move on to item 9, the annual climate emergency and sustainability report. Is it Michael leading on this one? No,
it's me, Alison.
It's me. Oh,
Gillian.
It's me, Gillian. Yes, of course, Gillian. So it's Michael's name on a piece of paper. Thank you very much, Gillian.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone. I don't know if anyone in the room gets the Met Office alerts when you're looking at your weather. when you get up in the morning, but I got mine this morning and it said there was going to be hurricane winds in the northeast, winds of over 1,000 miles an hour. And thankfully, we got a message very quickly to say that the Met Office were having problems with their digital push outs today. So I was very grateful to that. But it really feels real, doesn't it? Climate change, and you only need to turn on the television to look what's happening in other parts of the world to realise this is something that really matters, and it matters to us. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today and introduce the report that you have in front of you. Can I introduce some colleagues who are on the call with me? We've got Gary Kedge, who's the Assistant Director of Infrastructure and Sustainability and deputising for Alan Wilson this morning. My colleague Deb Janney, who is our Sustainability Officer, and Michael Black, who's our Energy Manager. And of course on the call we have Derek Murray, who is the board's Sustainability Champion. So this initiative, or not initiative, this project, this strategy, our Climate Emergency Sustainability Strategy, it's co-sponsored by the Director of Infrastructure and Sustainability and the Director of Public Health. What Paul's just been talking about is as integral to this agenda as anything to do with hard infrastructure. And of course, that's where a lot of our focus lies, because we're heading for, or trying to head towards, targets that look at net zero. But it really, our strategy reflects that holistic approach that's needed to mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change. So it's a partnership between public health and infrastructure. And I'm introducing this paper as chair of the Sustainability Governance Group, which oversees plans and activities towards our net zero and sustainability targets, and reports on progress through our performance committee. Now, this paper that you have in front of you, the annual report, we have a statutory duty to publish this report. And so we're sharing with the board before it becomes public on our websites. We're given a template by the Scottish Government to produce this report, but it's more than just fulfilling our statutory obligations. The annual report really is our important reference point. It gives us a factual account of our progress. And just as Paul was talking about the nuances of annual reports and which year we're talking about, we're referring to our activities and progress during 2023 and 2024. So the fiscal year 23-24. And this report itself highlights all our challenges and successes towards achieving what we've achieved in the year, particularly through our annual delivery plan and our objectives and more. And if you read it, it does provide this trailer of what we've started to do in the current financial year. And I'm not going to go on for much longer, Alison, you'll be pleased to know, but really I wanted to highlight the significant progress that we've made in a couple of areas. One, increasing awareness and ownership of this agenda. You yourself, Alison, others on the board, really pioneering and championing this, as are our staff and our communities, but also our work in creating some of the conditions that are really important for change, educational programmes, our anchor institution work, working with communities, etc. But I have to say that the annual report does reflect the limitations that we have towards achieving net zero, and partly because of the challenges in our big estate, reducing emissions from heat and power generated on our largest sites. That's our enduring challenge, and it's needed. We need to achieve greater building energy efficiency in our building structures, and we need to be up to date and be able to adapt and adopt to new technologies as information becomes available to us. But of course, the barriers to doing all of this, and therefore our barriers and challenges in meeting the targets we've got towards net zero, are a recognised gap in investment and capital funding, not unique to us, but also the uncertainties about the technology and what it may yield. But in closing, Alison, the hard infrastructure is one part of it. Please read and enjoy the annual report, which highlights what we're doing well, particularly building capacity, scaling up action in our own organisation, and the projects that we have with our communities to help them become much more climate resilient. And doing that will help what Paul was talking about earlier about reducing health harms, looking at inequalities, and at the same time carbon emissions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Julie. That's very helpful. The report really does set out lots of important points about what we are doing and what we are doing ourselves across staff groups and across our communities as well. And that really shines through from the report, as well as what's shining through is the commitment to do it as well. And obviously you've mentioned some of the challenges which makes things difficult, but I think what's important is NHS Grampian is committed to this work, and that shines through from this report. So thank you to everybody for the commitment shown in this. Dennis, please.
Thanks, Chair. And again, probably just echo your comments in terms of welcoming all the work that is being done and the efforts being made by all our staff. And I think if we had to maybe capture some of the energy that was coming from Gillian in her presentation, I'm just wondering where we would be in net zero. But I'm just, but a point in this is actually, if we're doing everything that we can possibly do, and we're able to evidence that we're doing everything that we can possibly do, and that's, because everything is evidence-based, should we then be fined by SEPA for not actually achieving our net zero targets? Because when we've got this financial constraint on our board, for instance, and every board has the same, but if we can evidence everything that we do and we can do is being done, is it not a slight irony then? And is it not counterintuitive to then be fined by a national body, which is overseen by the government, when we're trying to make these absolute savings that we are doing? And it really is just this point. We've got the evidence. What can we do to then say to SEPA, don't be so silly. Don't absolutely fine NHS Grampian for doing the best that we can. Thank you.
Yeah, Dennis, I think the sentiment behind what you're saying will be shared by everybody on this call on that one. I'm not sure it is SEPA that one's at the back end of this line, but Gillian, do you want to maybe clarify that?
Can I bring Gary in to explain a little bit more about the fines and a little bit more about what we're trying to do in that area? Are you there, Gary?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, happy to touch on that. I believe it's government policy, Dennis, rather than just specifically SEPA. And obviously, what you're referring to as fines, financial penalties, have been there for many years now. And obviously what's happening is that the level of emissions we're allowed are reducing in terms of target, which means that the fine that we're paying is increasing. We are, however, doing quite a lot on site. There's many facets to this. So the headline fine, I suppose, is what we pay under what's called the EU ETS scheme. But we've also done quite a lot of work to maximise the efficiency of our combined heat and power plant on the Forester Hill site. And as a consequence of that, we're actually, I won't use the word avoiding, we have reduced significantly the amount of climate change levy tax that we pay on our gas bills. So it is quite a complex financial picture, but you're right. And the bottom line is that if our emissions stay at the current level, the cost to the organisation, which is ultimately a circular cost to the government, will continue to grow. So we have to focus on investigating the technologies that are available to us. The Forester Hill Health Campus is an enormous site. It is a big emitter. It's complex. It serves 4 hospitals, a dental school, and other associated buildings. Part of it is about the heat and power generating technology that needs to be in place. We're investigating options around that at the moment, but part of it is about the infrastructure that currently exists within all of those buildings and how we upgrade all of that. And as you've heard throughout this meeting, we are significantly limited in terms of the funding that we can put into, one, investigating the use of those technologies, and 2, the investment in actually upgrading the infrastructure. But it is something that I think you mentioned earlier. We have a lot of energy around this. We are pushing the envelope as much as we can, and we are looking to progress as quickly as we can within the constraints that we've outlined in the report.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. And you're aware as well that there is a lot of thinking going on about how we can address this as well as raising the fact that the fines are having to be paid currently and raising questions around that. But the work I think being done to think about the infrastructure is really important as well. And I know that there's people across the organisation committed to that too. And it's probably what Derek wants to touch on as well. So I will bring him in, maybe as an answer to Dennis as well. Thank you, Derek.
Thanks, Alison. I think everybody around the table is aware of my annoyance at the fines, so I'm not really going to talk about that. What I wanted to say was really the progress that is being made over the years, I think is really tremendous. And the progress in reporting it to this board is tremendous. A few years ago, the board was hardly cited on anything that was being done. It's now got this type of reporting and reporting to Perfect now on a regular basis to let the board know what is being done, the energy behind what's being done, the desire to do it as well. So I just really wanted to congratulate Gillian and the team on that progress. I think it's really good to be able to see progress, and you know, we talk about celebrating success. I think this is becoming more and more of a priority, and more people are getting involved, and I think that's really good news. Obviously, fantastic amount to go in terms of the heat and power, and you know, the biggest emitter of carbon from the NHS at all. We've obviously got to do something about that. Work is going on in the background for that. But I really wanted to come back to where we were a few years ago to where we are now. Huge progress and progress that is now being seen to be made, which I think is really important. So I'll shut up now. Thank you very much.
Well, don't do that, but thank you very much for those comments as well. Adam, you put your hand up during that. Do you want to come in as well?
Thank you, Alison. It was just to close the loop on the fines.
Yeah.
The board did ask me to raise it with government previously, which I can confirm I have formally done, and we await a response. I did it a couple of months ago, so we maybe chase them up and see if they've made any progress on it. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adam. Thank you. And finally, Anne, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gillian, for an excellent report. And as usual, your enthusiasm is so infectious, and for all the progress you are making in this. I have a very simple question. As this is an open board, could you maybe explain a little bit about what green theatres are, in case everybody thinks they're not going to be getting any anaesthetics?
Yeah, thank you. And briefly, Gillian, can you?
Of course, and Deb Janney's here too, and we'll know a lot more about it. This is a national initiative to improve the environmental aspects of many aspects of theatres. And when you think about theatres, you might think about single-use instruments. If you've ever experienced surgery yourself, you'll know what goes on in a theatre. So single-use instruments is one of the things that's been looked at. Our successes have been in gases, in anaesthetic gases, and trying to improve the efficiency of use of anaesthetic gases, or to reduce the need for them as well. And some of the figures that are in the report are really quite dramatic, aren't they? But it doesn't mean that you won't have anaesthetics when you go into theatre. I will vouch for it myself with my broken wrist, that you still have gas and air as a pain blocker when you need it. But this is a big area of carbon emission where great progress can be made. We're beginning to see it. We've got a very long way to go, but it's all about making it making our practices environmentally friendly.
Thank you, Gillian. Debjani, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think the terminology green theatres is a bit misleading, because the practices that would be in the green theatres project are actually it could be used widespread in many clinical areas. But the reason was because theatres was traditionally a very high energy and carbon intensive unit of the hospital. So we were looking at many different aspects. So from recycling of either instruments or just improving recycling rates in theatres, to looking at anaesthetic gases, scavenging systems for capturing this, and heating and ventilation in these areas, because obviously it needs to be very well controlled in theatres, and we're just looking at ways to make it more efficient. So that's what the Green Theatre programme is all about. It covers so many aspects, but all of it is transferable to other clinical areas within our hospital. So
thank you so much.
Thank you. So patient care remains at the heart.
Progress.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. And patient care remains at the heart of it. I think we need to emphasise that point as well. And thank you very much for the question, Anne. It's really useful to bring things like that forward. So thank you. Thank you as well. Okay, I can't see any other indications there. So we are asked to approve the annual climate emergency and sustainability report. Can we approve the report, please? Brilliant, thank you. Then moving on to item 10, planning for winter 24-25. Geraldine, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So we've brought this report which outlines our approach to winter planning for this year. So obviously this follows very similar to what we did last year, and the approach that we're taking is to make sure it is a whole system plan, and aligning the work we're doing with some of the national work around about the Health and Social Care Winter Preparedness Plan, which is now published. So you'll see that we are very much thinking about how we align to the plans that are we held in the Health and Social Care partnerships as well. And we're completing now a readiness checklist, which will cover all of arrangements around about business continuity plans, unscheduled care, planned care, primary care, mental health, social care, and also how we consider our workforce and our staff well-being as part of this. So very happy to take any feedback or thoughts on the approach, and we will be bringing back the full plan to the board in December. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Geraldine Hussain, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And in some ways, this links in very nicely to what we've just been talking about in the previous item. Can I commend the report, first of all? One of the, quote, traditional, quote, aspects around winter planning that we've dealt with in the past has been around trips and falls, and we've talked about salt bags. We've linked what we do to de-icing in communities. We've looked at routes which may be more hazardous for our citizens. Now that, you know, and this is perhaps potentially arguable, but we're not having as much snow. Icy conditions are reduced statistically compared to, say, 10 years ago. We're getting other risks now around flooding, strong winds, mini hurricanes, hopefully not 1,000 miles an hour that Gillian mentioned. But I'm just wondering, in terms of those risks, what's the thinking around them? And how are we incorporating, mitigating those risks or reacting to them into our planning?
Thank you, Hussain. Geraldine?
Yes, thank you. No, it's a really interesting point, and I think obviously the winter plan does need to consider the sort of seasonal changes that we experience, and I think that's absolutely right in terms of those different types of events that we're seeing, and obviously there have been a lot of learning in terms of the responses we've used in previous years around about some of those really challenging times for flooding, strong winds, and the storms. So I think it all kind of comes together in terms of the learning from we've had into the winter planning. So I think the seasonal part is really important, and as part of that multi-agency approach, if you like, we link in with our partners to think about, you know, what's the local authorities' approach to that, as well as our own from the healthcare side and social care side. So I think that all hopefully all come together in the final plan when we bring that through. I think the other thing to mention is, again, when we're dealing with significant weather events, we quite often still experience the day-to-day operational pressures as well. And I think part of it is how we can support our colleagues to be prepared and to be agile enough to respond to both, which again is part of that learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. Thank you. Stephen, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Geraldine, thank you for the report, which as you described, sort of reflects the the way winter planning has been done in recent years. So broadly welcome it, I guess, given that it's the intention to come back with a finished article to the December board meeting. I would make a request that we're able to discuss it at GAPF, probably in the November meeting. That'd be really useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Stephen. Thank you. Pamela, you put your hand up there. Is this to answer these questions as well? Or is it something different? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, it was a general comment, so happy to wait for others.
All right, lovely. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you. Okay, so Geraldine, did you know Stephen's comment about GAPF and coming back to there as well? Thank you, brilliant. I think it's maybe another action as well coming from this. Ian, please. Ian, thank you.
Thanks, Alison. I'm now safely back in my office in Aberdeen. Not to get into the detail of local authorities' winter maintenance regimes, but just to correct Hussein, with apologies, Hussein, the freeze-thaw cycles that we now see many more of are actually make it more difficult to maintain roads and pavements, particularly, especially pavements, in a safe condition. So I certainly wouldn't expect to see the number of injuries from people going skiting on pavements to reduce. I haven't seen any data, but if anything, I suspect if the freeze thaws continue to be the norm, then we may well see an increase.
Thank you for that clarification, Ian. Thank you. Derek, please.
Thanks, Alison. A couple of things. First one, in relation to Hussein's comments about flooding and other changes as part of climate change. That's looked at, part of the sustainability group is looking into that type of thing, as is Alan Wilson's look at the infrastructure. It's all becomes part of that, so it is being taken into account. My question really was review of GeoPes. GeoPes, my impression on it seems to be it's a very good system in that it's telling you what's happening in the different parts of the hospital and the other parts, the care parts as well. So I wonder what was going on with the review.
Thank you, Derek. Geraldine?
Yes, thanks for that. So we have included that as part of, I suppose, a new element of the plan this year. And so just to explain, the GeoPes is a measure of pressures within each part of the system. And we do have at the moment a daily call where everyone comes in and they each share how different parts of the system are placed. So it is based on a sort of national tool, which again is being progressed as well. So I think what we're looking to do differently this year is to think about with the GeoPes levels, there's actions alongside them, and at the moment we've got those planned individually for different parts of the system. So health and social care partnerships have their actions, parts of acute have their own actions, but what we haven't done is look at that holistically across a sort of pathway lens. So what we're hoping to do is actually probably not to create anything new or additional, but just to streamline that much better, so that when we do experience particular escalations in different parts of the system, it's clear at that point how we can all work together to resolve it, rather than working in silos, I suppose, would be the opposite of that. So that piece of work, so it's probably more a bit of a sort of desktop realignment of some of those actions and agreement, but that would be the refresh. And we are looking to take that piece of work through a new whole system tactical group, which has been endorsed by the chief executive team. And that would be very much about that sort of forward-looking, but learning as well. So not just that sort of day-to-day response, but also thinking about what's coming up ahead and what do we need to be thinking about and planning for now. So that would then be a sort of new sort of tactical level arrangement, which would then oversee that piece of work.
Thank you, Geraldine. Will that feature in the report you're bringing in December as well? Will that be part of that?
I would hope so, yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Derek, you content with that?
Yeah, that was very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pamela, Pam.
Yeah, thanks very much. I thought it was probably helpful just to mention in relation to it's commented in there around delayed discharges. Members will be aware that there's been a national push around a mission to address people who are delayed, and it's just to highlight that that has been really challenging. So not just locally, but also nationally, there has been very little reduction overall in the number of delayed discharges. There's been a lot of sharing and learning across Scotland to see if there's anything that we can do to improve processes, to support around that. But some of the underlying structural issues which are challenging all parts of the system remain in place. So certainly for us across Grampian, it's issues such as care home availability. And I think it's probably important to highlight we have completed, as part of the winter planning, you have to complete a kind of an Excel spreadsheet that goes back with some of our actions. And one of the things that we've clearly identified in that is that we are unable across the partnerships to bring on any additional capacity this year. So in previous years, we've either had national funding or we've used our own funding to support some additional capacity to prepare for winter. But this winter, given our funding position, the three health and social care partnerships have not been able to do that. So I think it's probably just important to highlight that about maybe a potential difference going into this year from previous years.
Thanks very much, Pam. That's very helpful too. Thank you. Okay, Colette, please.
Yes, thank you. In section 2.3.3, there's a statement that says increased cost of living pressures and expected reductions in household allowances are likely to have an impact on health for those most at risk. Is that just a broad statement, or has any analysis been done on the extent to which this may or may not be a reality this winter?
Thank you. Geraldine?
Thank you. No, so we're probably still undertaking that analysis just now so that we understand again what the mitigations round about this would be. I mean, we will have data from previous years as well, and obviously we do know that there are some issues, you know, if there are financial challenges or areas of deprivation, when we do then see obviously more impact during winter. So we do have some data, but again, I think we probably need to understand more about what we're expecting this year and then how we can respond to it. And I think it will probably pick up on, you know, a lot of the things that maybe have been mentioned today already around about how we respond through, you know, our child poverty action plan, for example, thinking about our link workers, about making sure people are supported and are given the right types of support, financial advice, and you know what's available to them locally. But I see Susan maybe wants to come in on that as well.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, thanks, Geraldine. And just to add to what Geraldine's already said, I mean, some of the work that we're doing regarding warm homes on prescriptions. So we have identified groups of patients at greatest risk of admission due to inability to heat their homes, working with third sector, working with local authorities in terms of advice, in terms of insulation, and that we're part of a national study last year, and the feedback that we had was very, very positive. What we'd not been able to do was link the support provided to the patients and the ultimate impact in terms of their admission. But we're continuing the project this year and hope to get more data on that, but very positively received.
Thank you very much, Susan. Thank you. Okay, Colette?
Yeah, it was just when you link that to Pamela's comments and the bed-based issue that we have, I mean, it goes back to that point about a collaborative overview of all of this.
Yeah, it certainly does. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
you very much. I think I can't see any more comments, hands indicated on this one. So we're asked to endorse the approach outlined in the paper and agree the future reporting, request the works brought back to the board meeting in December. Can we agree those recommendations, please? Thank you. And then item 11, NHS Grampian working in collaboration with the North of Scotland. Adam, I think, is leading us on this paper, please. Adam.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm joined by Jim Cannon, who's the Director of Planning for the North of Scotland. So thanks to Jim for joining me and for co-authoring the paper with Lorraine Scott, the Head of Planning in NHS Grampian, who unfortunately can't join us today. So Jim will absolutely help with any questions and things. I just wanted to give a very short introduction, actually. The idea of the paper was really in discussion with the chair, thinking about the commitment we make to North of Scotland and really trying to have the board up the middle of regional planning and what we do regionally. So this is very much, I guess, the start of a journey through, through the future, where we'll re-engage the board much more on regional planning than I think we've done recently, although we have in previous times done a bit more on regional planning than we have in the last bit. So that's the idea of it. So lots of it's just teeing it up, getting the understanding for board members about what we do, trying to show some of the commitment, some of the rationale for working on a regional basis. And I think, like lots of things, there's definitely an opportunity there, and it takes work to deliver it. So again, there's that whole bit about how we engage the team as a whole organisation to try and seize those opportunities, particularly around sustainability, equity in the North. And I think that would probably be enough of an introduction. Very happy to see what comments people have or any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Adam, and thank you, Jim, as well. And very much welcome. They've got this paper here. I think it's something that's been happening, but the board hasn't really been cited on. And so it's really important to give that initial cite on this paper as well. And as the paper says, it kind of sets us up for what we'll be looking at in future as well. And I think it's really important for us to look at it in the point of view as well, that finding balance that's so important to us. How is this regional work helping us find the balance that we need to find as well? I think there's questions hinted at in the paper that we'll maybe today or later on actually delve further into around the governance and how we make sure the governance is tight around regional planning work, where that happens, and whether we can take assurance that it's happening in the right places in the right way as well when we're working with other boards on things. The outcomes of the work as well is really important for us to know about the outcomes of it. And obviously we're investing as NHS Grampian in regional working. So what are the outcomes? And there are key issues, I think, that are hinted at in this report that maybe colleagues will ask about now, but certainly which the paper does tell us will be developed in future papers as well. So it's really an introduction to something that probably the board wasn't cited enough on, and I think we need to be going forward. So thank you for the paper. Derek, please.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely pleased to see this paper. I think given the current financial climate, anything that we can do collectively is going to be a help to everybody. So as we move forward with this regional stuff, I think it's important for the board to know what we're doing and to be able to determine that we're getting the maximum benefit out of working with our fellow boards across the north of Scotland. Really pleased to see it. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Derek. Colette, please.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had some experience of this when I was in the cancer world, and it works incredibly well. But my question relates to whether any additional time or resource or money is being made available to help already stretched teams to put this in place. Totally endorse it, but it's not being imposed. It's the right thing to do. But is there anything coming from central government to actually facilitate this and to push it forward?
Adam, can I turn to you, please?
Yeah, thank you, Alison. So I've just spotted Lorraine on the screen, so delighted that Lorraine is here. And thanks, Lorraine. I hope you heard my introduction. My thanks to you and Jim. I'll just say a little bit and then perhaps ask Jim to contribute. So there is resource that pays for the central team, of which Jim's the lead and the director of planning. And that includes things like North of Scotland. And then there's also a funding stream that we contribute to. So we put some of our money into a sort of a central pot as well. So I guess in terms of beyond that, is there another stream that comes in to do it I don't think so, but I'll check with Jim. But we do have those two fairly obvious funding streams that allow us to work. If it's okay, Alison, could Jim add anything?
Of course,
to
if Jim's
some that
here,
I've
of
missed?
course,
Thank you.
Jim.
Yeah.
Jim can come in as well. Jim?
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Colette, there is revenue funding to support elements of the team, as Adam has alluded to. They're specifically around cancer and specialist paediatrics. The rest is funded, as Adam said, through board recharges, contributions from all the North of Scotland boards. But there is I think the anticipation that and acknowledgement that there will be a requirement for additional capacity to support cross-boundary working. It may not be exactly in the same form that it currently is. So there are other pieces of work around, oncology, which is the most advanced currently around a strategic target operating model for oncology. And there's recognition that to plan and then implement and support that national approach to oncology will require a different kind of resourcing model, which won't necessarily fit within current regional arrangements. Hopefully that answers your question. There's still a bit of unknown. There's an unknown kind of element to resourcing going forward, but there is recognition that the different phases will require different kinds of resourcing.
Yeah, Chair, if I could just come in on that point. I mean, from memory, one of the challenges to cross-regional working is the issue about information governance and IT systems. Has that one been resolved?
Jim, do you want to come in?
No. But again, there's recognition, there's work going on within the digital space, nationally, regionally, to support that. Primarily nationally now, I think. There's much more of a kind of focus on how do we support cross-boundary working from a digital point of view, and then an IG point of view as well, which isn't all just about digital, but significant chunk of it is.
Okay, thank you, Colette. Thank you, John, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, welcome seeing this. Just wanted to tease out a bit further, just in terms of being assured that what's going to come out of this, because you're saying we've not been cited on it recently, but I think it had dropped off in terms of practice to some degree recently, and so it's being stood up again, which is great. I suppose it's just understanding why it had dropped off and how we can avoid that going forward, because it seems to be in a bit of a stop-start. I'm maybe slightly overstating it, but there was an issue there, and just to avoid it happening again, because everybody is so busy. So I'm assuming that there were going to be certain practical things that will come out of this, which are about outcomes for people and outcomes for finances, and that becomes the focus. But I mean, Adam maybe has that history of where it was there, where it wasn't there. So I'm just wanting to be assured that this isn't something we're just being told to do and it's adding to people's tasks, but it is something that's outcome focused. Thanks.
Thank you, Adam. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, if it's okay, I perhaps get Lorraine and Jim to comment, and then I'll pick anything up that they've not covered. But I'm sure they'll cover it. But since they're both here, it'd be great to hear their voices as well.
Jim first.
Lorraine, you happy to start, and then
all right, Lorraine then. Lorraine, start.
Sorry, Alison.
Thanks, Adam. In terms of it dropping off, so I think up until pre-COVID, there was each board had sight of the regional plan and the priorities around that, and that was formally endorsed. Since COVID, I think it's fair to say that regional working has been happening. So there's lots of things actually happening, and it's NHS Grampian delivering regional services and supporting regional networks. And those were happening, and the governance of that was happening, but it wasn't necessarily coming up to board level. So I suppose just to assure that was still happening. In terms of the priorities, I think it's fair to say with the recovery after COVID, and I think we've highlighted this in the paper, boards were kind of internally looking around, being able to ensure that they were responding to those, but at the same point, you know, feeding up what were the challenges, because there were probably different challenges after COVID in terms of pre-COVID. So it's taken a bit of time, I think it's fair to say, around just understanding where are the areas for greatest collaboration on top of what we've already been doing. So I think it's fair to say there's been lots of work continuing, but it was about, I suppose, refocusing where the priorities were and where that would add the greatest value across the boards. And as you're aware, even though that work was going on, there were still other pieces of work going on between, you know, for example, Grampian and Highland around the maternity services. So, you know, there's been other pieces of work going on around that as well. So I'll maybe just let Jim come in to cover anything I haven't.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Lorraine. Thanks, Chair. John, yeah, I would just take it back one stage further in terms of time and reference the regional delivery planning process, which occurred between 2017 and 2019. And that had an impact on how cross-boundary working was developed, planned, prioritised, governed. So pre-2017, I started in this role in 2013. What I inherited was a process whereby a regional report, an annual report was developed, and that was brought round all of the boards in the north, and I think the other regions did a similar exercise. So boards got sight of the priorities of the work and had some input to regional working through that process. So I used to go around all 6 boards once a year and open up discussions around priorities. But when regional delivery planning came along, that whole process was changed. And so then we had a short period of time between 2019 and COVID, whereby we were starting to stand those sorts of things back up again, and then COVID hit, and you know, Lorraine's updated on what's happened since then. There continued to be cross-boundary working, so absolutely endorse what Lorraine's saying. It's just that it wasn't bubbling up to board level at that point.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. And I think that's really important points to make as well, that it was happening, and shows really the importance of us being cited on this work as well, because we need as a board to be assured that work being done on this is being governed appropriately in the appropriate place. Now, it might not be with us that governance is happening, but we need to take assurance that the governance around this is happening somewhere. And I think because we weren't being cited on it, that is something that was beyond our radar. So that's why it's really important to have this conversation now and have questions like that asked by John as well, so we can have clarity on it. John, are you content with those answers?
Yes, no, that's helpful, and look forward to seeing the progress and the outcomes as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have Mark and then Stephen, please. Mark, please.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. I think that just to reassure John that regional working happens all the time in my department. Oral maxillofacial surgery, we cover Orkney, Shetland, Highland, and everything that goes on with there. So we're regionally working all the time and making pathways and digital pathways throughout that at a level, at service levels all the time. So just be assured about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And Stephen, please.
Yep, thank you, Alison. Good to see Jim on the call, you amongst others. Yeah, it was really just from a governance perspective. You know, as Jim had described, there have been various different models, various different approaches taken over quite an extended period of time on this. As a member of this board, I welcome the report. I guess you just for clarity, as things progress, I am very well aware that at national level, the trade unions and professional organisations, certainly for identical change staff, have always, there's always been some tensions or some suspicion about cross-boundary employment, exactly what that looks like, and so things like organisational change, which I know we've already discussed in an earlier part of this morning's meeting. So it was just to sort of restate that it's not that it can't be negotiated and dealt with, but it's good to see this back on the agenda again. Thank you.
Yeah, Stephen, and that aspect as well is even more reason why we have to be clear about the governance and know how these things are being managed and move forward as well. So thank you for that comment as well. That emphasises the importance of it. Dennis, please.
Yeah. wonder if it's something that we need to improve our comms on in terms of for our wider sort of patient cohorts in some respects, that regional working does happen, it's effective and it's better outcomes for our patient groups in terms of perhaps being seen at the right place at the right time for the right reason. And I'm just wondering if we need to do more in terms of utilising that positive messaging in terms of that regional approach. Thank you.
Yeah, we certainly do need to enhance positive messages and do comms where we can. I don't know if Stuart's on the call or whether he would have any comment about that. I don't know.
Alison, yes, I'm
yes,
here.
That's Stuart. Stuart, more comms around regional work?
I think there probably is more that can be done, would be the honest answer. We know that it's a challenge for people who, very much want local services and are not always comfortable travelling outside board areas. But yes, I would agree there's more that can be done to explain the reason why that's increasingly necessary. So I'll take that away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Jim, are you coming back on that one?
Yeah, just quickly. Thank you, Alison. I think there's a danger that and I think this references Lorraine's point that cross-boundary working happens, and someone else mentioned the fact that Grampian are already supporting and working very closely with Orkney and Shetland, and it just happens, naturally, and as part of SLAs. And there's a danger that through the comms that we box cross-boundary working into a regional definition, whereas if there was a description of it as you may not get your care within your board, but that we've got close working relationships actually across Scotland, that might be a more helpful message for the public. Just my perspective. Thanks, Alison.
We'll leave that with Stuart.
I think that's what I mean, though, Chair, about the right treatment at the right time for the right reasons. And it's about actually trying to circle that around in terms of that positive messaging, because if people say you can wait 2 years, say, for this, but you can actually have it in 6 months if you go elsewhere, I think the natural instinct for most would be, I'll take the 6 month option, please. It's that kind of thing. So it's for the right reason, for the right time, at the right place. But thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I think that will be taken away. Thanks very much, Dennis. And have Derek then Colette, please. Derek.
Yeah, thanks. In terms of regional working, it seems to me it doesn't need to be the patient that moves. I understand that when my father had an operation on his neck, it was done by a surgeon from Dundee who comes up every now and again to do that type of work. So the regional cooperation can go both ways. Patients can move, but also the surgeons can move as well. So it's not all that you're always going to have to move. It's that you may get your operation done by a surgeon from another board. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. I can see Lorraine nodding to that. Lorraine, is there anything you want to say to that? Or?
Just to agree, that practice is a model we have already in some services where we have clinical teams who visit other boards and provide services locally around that. So it's again, that's something we've done for a number of years, and again, I think that's a really valid point, Derek, around highlighting it's not always the patient that moves, it's sometimes the team that moves, depending on what the specialty is, because I think it's not every specialty.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Lorraine. Thank you. And Colette, please.
Yeah, just going back to Dennis's point, I totally agree with what you said, Dennis, but I think we just have to be careful when we're presenting it to the public, because there is a heavy reliance on friends and families for people who have to go out of area to have their medical treatment. And that could result in health inequality. So we just need to be careful about how we strike that balance.
Yeah, thank you. I think we'll leave all these messages with Stuart for how we respond to it, though. So thanks very much for the discussions, very helpful. Adam, any final words on this? Or?
Thanks very much. Useful comments, and we'll look forward to bringing more back and re-engaging the board in the regional planning stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also think it's been a great opportunity for us to get to know Jim and Lorraine as well. So thank you both for being here this morning as well for this. Thank you. Okay, we're asked to endorse this paper. So can we endorse, please? Brilliant, thank you. All right, now we have the approved committee forum and IJB minutes to note. So I'll just go through these in turn. We have the Audit and Risk Committee from the 25th of June 24. Noted. The Performance Assurance, Finance and Infrastructure Committee 28th of August 24. Is that noted? Thank you. Population Health Committee 19th of July 24. Noted as well. Thank you. The Area Clinical Forum of the 26th of June 24. Noted, thank you. The IJB reports, Aberdeen City IJB 9th of July 24. Noted, thank you. The Murray IJB 27th of June 24. Noted, thank you. Okay, thank you for noting all those reports. Fewer this time because it's only a short time since the last board meeting. Then we have item 13, any other business. I haven't had any other business notified to me. Thank you. And that leaves us then for the date of next meeting. The date of next meeting is the 12th of December 24. So look forward to having the next open board meeting at that point. We have a closed board meeting this afternoon at 1:30. So I see in 25 minutes, let's call it 25 to 2 to give us the half-hour break. I think it's important to be our best with breaks. So we will have a closed board meeting at 25 to 2, please, for those attending that one. And thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you this afternoon, and those who are attending that meeting, and everyone else, thank you very much for your attendance today. Thank you.
Thank you.